Meeting to order.
Okay. And he just keeps, that's his whole constituency. It's like that woman last night. You want her first?
Oh, yeah.
Thank you, I think. How many are these?
For the Pledge of Allegiance for the County Council Planning Retreat. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
There's no public here.
No. This meeting was duly advertised in compliance with the Freedom of Information Act. Do we have anyone on Zoom today?
Mark was on before.
He was, hold on, maybe.
There he is.
Oh, good.
Yes.
Good morning.
Yep, I'm here, Alice.
Great. At this time, I'd like to have a motion to approve the agenda.
I'll make the motion.
Do I have a second?
I'll second that.
All right. Without objection, the agenda is approved. Do we have anybody from the public? No. To sign up for public comment? I don't see anyone.
No, ma'am.
Okay, let's continue on. This is going to be led by our county administrator, Mr. Mike Moore, and other personnel on staff. And we already have a handout you can take notes on, too. It was handed out by Mr. Hank Amundsen. Yes, sir.
Good morning, Madam Chair and Council. Welcome to our retreat. I'm excited to be here for the first one since my now 7-month tenure. So great to be with you this morning. Staff has put in a lot of effort for this today, and we're looking to present information and get your feedback and essentially develop a plan going forward for this year. We're not going to solve all of these problems this morning, but we basically want to tee up here's items that we need to work on this year, that administration needs to go back, do some work, and then come back to you all. So the goal is coming out of this, we'll have a list of items that we're going to work on, and then we would plan to bring these forward to committee, full council to get a vote. So then we've got, administration's got clear direction on what we're going to accomplish this year. So with that said, we've broken it into, you can see on your agenda a number of items, but first off, we want to start with personnel because it's my belief that our people are our most important asset we're here at the county. And then next, the facilities, what our people come to work in every day is also important. Then, of course, finance. We've got to figure out how we're going to pay for all this, so we'll have that discussion too. We'll talk about some other items, and then we'll work to develop a list for priorities. And what I'm going to do is, as Hank is going to I'm going to turn it over to him at some point in the near future. And he's going to kind of run it today. We'll take notes, we'll have discussion, and that it'll be a participatory format is kind of my goal. So all that said, we're starting off with personnel. One of the things that you all charged me with when I took this position was to look at the organization and come up with a revised organization chart. So I'd like to advance to, I think it's the next slide, or perhaps the next.
And that clicker in front of you.
Oh, it does work. Okay, I'm sorry.
If we tested it, it should work. Make sure-
We'll put it to the test.
Look on the side. Sorry.
I'm sure it's operator error. Okay. Okay, so here's what, and we worked with staff, and I'd like to give a lot of credit to staff and to HR, Catherine Mead, in this. But this is our new organization chart. Where we're going to be is we've got council, obviously clerk to council, and our elected officials. We all work for the citizens, and then it flows from there. So you all have hired me as the administrator. Legal, right now, at county attorney, we have the county attorney position is vacant. We have 2 deputies. We are advertising for a county attorney position with the goal of having a single county attorney that works for the administrator. I know there's been some discussions about, council having an attorney as well, so we're going to continue that discussion as to how that's going to work, if it's going to be, some type of contract. But in the near term, From my standpoint, organizationally, it's better to have one attorney and not have a split between staff and council, because we get a lot of conflicting information at times, or recommendations. Then beyond that, we work to, and of course, and I just want to point out on legal that there is a dash line to council, so we will continue as we have in the past. There'll be no change as far as Mr. Holbert providing support to you until we come up with a way ahead on that. So then we'll have our special assistant, Hank. We'll have HR, which is going to be a direct report to me. And that first row below me are all my direct reports. So these will be reporting directly. So special assistant, HR, the deputy, I have decided I would like to hire a deputy, so we're going to move forward advertising that position. Given the workload, I think it's appropriate to have a deputy. The PIO, Ms. Nichols will be working for me as well, and then Ms. Harriet is the CFO. But you'll notice with CFO, we don't have them all broken out, but she's going to take on some additional responsibilities with the assessor, procurement, register of deeds. So that'll be new, but we're all going to line that under the CFO. Then beyond that, we'll have the ACAs who report to the deputy county administrator. And we'll have, to the most part, what you see today with some minor changes. What you will see are 4 ACAs as opposed to what we had in the past, which I believe was 6. So one position was by attrition. Another position, we've eliminated that position. And obviously, anybody impacted by this has been notified, and we are working with them on a way ahead. And to the extent we need to come to council for to move forward on those, if I want to call it severance packages, we will do so in the near future. So we have Mr. Atkinson will have building services, capital projects, which is due for him. But I think that makes sense because he has all the building services folks and the planners, so that made sense from us from an alignment perspective, as well as land preservation. And you'll say, what's land preservation? Well, our recommendation is we take passive parks and call it land preservation. I think it more closely aligns with what they do. We will still have passive parks, but we were going to call this land preservation as opposed to passive parks. So that's a distinction for you all. For ACA, the next, Mr. Robinson will be very similar to what he already has today, which is animal services, detention center, EMS, and mosquito control. We're going to take fleet services out of public works and make that, we recommend making that a department just because of its impact across the entire county with the sheriff and all the other vehicles. And so that will fall under that ACA position. And then the next one, and by the way, we're not calling them ACAs for any specific thing. We're just going to call them ACAs. So if we need to move things around in the future, we certainly could. We've got Jared will have airports, engineering, facilities, and public works. Really not a major change there. And then we have one, and it's going to be more community services focused. And Audra's picked up a lot, but I think Audra's obviously well suited for this. She's done a great job with everything, as have all the ACAs. But I point out she'll maintain alcohol and drugs, disabilities and special needs, human services. Parks and Recs will be new, but we think that fits under that hat of community services, the library, Veterans Affairs, and voter registration and elections. And lastly, we have information technology and records management, which will be, at this point, they'll just be direct reports to the administrator. They didn't really fit cleanly under anything else, but given the nature of IT and its impact to all, not only administration, but council and all elected officials, we think that's appropriate, as well as records management, just for the nature of what they do there. So that's our organization chart. Any questions on that? You will see a reduction in the budget for those 2 positions, so that's a good part of this is we're eliminating 2 ACA positions. So it will, I think, make administration more streamlined and efficient.
Any questions?
I
Mr. Glover?
just have
Yes, sir.
one. And I don't know myself, so I'm going to accept whatever you have here, but Parks and Recreation, what's your logic behind placing it there versus?
Well, we think it fits, we're consolidating positions, so I think of all that's remaining, to us, it made the most sense to put Parks and Recreation under Auditor, because she already handles the library, she handles human services, disability special needs, we're already community-facing departments, and we think Parks and Rec is a lot of the same, so that's our logic there.
Yes, ma'am?
Mine's not a question, but to go back to our first meeting when we had John DeLoach chair.
Yes.
So county council members are not to reach out to, like, Parks and Rec director. Tell us again your expectation of our role.
Yes, I appreciate that. So my expectation is, as far as my ACAs, I'm okay. I consider them, I prefer to be copied on anything that goes to an ACA, but from my perspective, if you all want to work through the ACAs, I'm okay with that. I would prefer not to go below that level with any communication. And if it's, if it's a request for information, obviously there, if it's something that you need to have done, and I make that distinction, right? If you just need information, that's one thing. If you need something, a request, directing, that needs to come through me. I just want to be very clear on that particular point. Does that make sense? I just want to make sure I'm clear in what I'm telling you all.
Can you go over again what building services is?
Building services, we got Chuck here. I don't want to speak out of school, so I'm going to let Chuck speak to that.
Thank you. Good morning.
Morning, Chuck.
So that is building codes,
Okay.
business license,
Business.
and code enforcement.
Code.
Those were combined under the leadership of our building official, who is Michael Brantley. We used to have a number of departments where you would have a department head and only 2 employees, 3 employees, and we have consolidated and streamlined that.
Okay.
So those are the 3 functions under building services.
Okay, and capital project management is separate from public works and public facilities, right?
That's correct.
Okay.
Yeah, facilities, if I didn't state that, actually, facilities is one thing I did not state earlier. It does go back under Jared. Previously, that had been moved out under Hank. So facilities is different from capital projects. And we're going to get into more discussion on capital projects and facilities and kind of our thinking on this. But we put a lot of thought into that, how that was organized.
Any other questions? Go
Just
ahead.
one, thank you,
Thank you.
Chairman. With the site visit, for example, at Bay Pines.
Yes,
Directly to you or
Yes.
to, perfect.
perfect.
Yeah.
Yeah, just to me, and we'll work
Then
it
you
out.
said, good.
Yeah,
Thank you.
yes, sir.
Mr. Bassman?
Yes, you will have this chart printed for each and every one of those?
Absolutely.
With a date on it? So
Yes.
that we know this is the one we are.
Yes, and this has not gone out to staff, but it will post-meeting, and you all have a date on this, so we will take that action to get a date on it as of today. And we will also update with the clerk all the board
Website.
support, all the website and board support and so forth. But I wanted you all to hear it from me before we went out with any communications officially.
Okay, great.
Just
sir.
one more. Land preservation.
Yes.
And I mean, I like the title, but we do have parks in land preservation.
We do, yes.
Yeah, and don't want to make the public confused too much, because when they think of parks, the first mind would be recreation, pals, et cetera, and not land preservation.
Yeah.
So you got to.
I appreciate you bringing that up. And one of the things when I first was going through the interview process, I saw passive parks and a Parks and Recreation confused me too. Because you think.
You were confused.
Yeah, so everybody's, I think a lot of folks are confused. I think Parks and Recreation, obviously, those are, facilities where we have active, what I consider to be active recreation. The parks, passive parks are, in some cases, we have land preservation. Going forward, there's more land preservation with, green space and so forth. So I only see that portfolio growing. Some of these parks allow for public access, or some of these, I should say, preserved lands, some do not. So I think we, and I get your point with our staff, we just need to be clear in terms of, their function is not only to preserve the land, but to make sure it is, those lands that are available to the public can be made available to the public. I don't know if you want to add anything that, Chuck, since we had talked about, I had actually challenged them to combine Parks and Rec and passive parks.
Did
but
you?
I did. I challenged him. And so I'll let Chuck.
I'm glad to hear that, because I guess it was a lively debate on that, so I'm glad to hear that.
Yes, sir. So the rules that govern the properties that we own under rural and critical and now green space limit that to passive access. We've called them parks, but really they are just access points for, so that the public can use and walk on, in a passive sense, those lands. The big difference is, we rent out the parks and recreation facilities for birthday parties, for all of these other things, where passive parks, even though we call them parks, there's no active recreation allowed on those lands. So that's the differentiation between the two. We call them parks, but they're really just access points for people to enjoy the property in a passive sense.
Is there another name, a synonym for parks that would be more for the passive? I mean, I'm just asking.
Consider that.
Yeah, I mean, we call them passive parks, but again, we're internally, we're starting to call them by their name. Whitehall, some of the Widgeon Point, some of the other ones, and we're trying to get away from the idea of it being a park, even though it is, that's kind of what it is, just an open space. But, yeah, the nomenclature is a little different, but, we're trying to get away from the sense that it is an active recreation facility, and it's more just for the access so that the public can enjoy the land in a passive nature.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Yes, sir.
So that could be a future definition.
Absolutely. That's something we could continue.
To list those particular pieces of property that we own that the public has access to.
I think that's an important point, because some of the pieces of land we own, we do not have public access. And there may never be in some cases.
Yes, yeah. All right.
So we'll take that as a action to look at. If there are no other questions, I'm going to now turn it over to
Any other
Hank
questions?
to proceed through. He's going to keep us on a timeline because we've got 3 hours. That's not to say we can't schedule another meeting if we don't get through everything, because there's a lot, but we'll just see how things proceed today.
Okay.
So Hank, I'll invite you up.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Just so you know, I'm going to kind of be the MC, cruise director. What I'm going to probably have to at times. There's a lot of information we're going to cover. There's a lot of core. This list of things we're discussing are very big ticket core items that staff and administration needs guidance on making decisions on what comes back to you in future workshops or future ordinance presentations, whether that's the budget or other definitions that we do. So there may be a time if we start going down a rabbit hole that I'm going to have to be the bad guy and say, hey, let's put a pin in that, and we'll come back to that. That'll be on our list at the end for a workshop or for a follow-up meeting. So I just want to kind of set that stage that I may have to do that because there is a lot of information. There will be a lot of questions, and that's good. We don't have enough time, and it's not really the time to go down those, but we want to know what you want us to bring back over the next year. And so I will, did you take the clicker?
I did, I'm sorry.
And we worked with all the ACAs and Mike worked with council leadership to kind of establish what we wanted to talk about today. And so, as he said, we're going to start with the people. And so when we talk about the people, it's going to start with Catherine Mead.
Hank, would you want us to wait till they finish their presentation and then ask questions, or do you want us to ask questions as we go on?
Are you comfortable?
I think it's broken up in areas, so you may be able to entertain questions on each particular subject as we go along.
And at the end of each session area, I'm going to kind of come up with a summary of, okay, we really need guidance on this, or we really need guidance on that, and that way we can organize what we're doing at the end. Okay. Yeah, she's got it.
Great. So you just let me know when.
Thank you. All right, good morning. I was just admiring these pictures of staff. Those were good selections. Let's jump right in. So I wanted today to talk to you about the current benefits we offer to our workforce. This is a big ticket item on the budget year in and year out, so I thought it would be a wonderful opportunity to refresh you on what we are offering to our workforce. Full-time employees are eligible for the following benefits. We have the medical and prescription plans. We do offer 2 different coverage tiers of a basic and a premium plan. We also provide dental, and anyone that has our medical coverage, the dental is folded into that. We are offering vision coverage, flex spending accounts, which are pre-tax accounts where folks can set aside some money out of their payroll to go towards medical expenses such as co-pays, pharmacy, dental work, eyeglasses, a number of eligible items. We offer long-term and short-term disability. We offer basic life and accidental death and dismemberment life insurance. We also provide voluntary term life insurance. We provide an employee assistance program, and I will note that that is for all employees, not just full-time. And then we have supplemental and voluntary plans to include accidental insurance, cancer insurance, critical illness, and whole life insurance. The current enrollments that I'm going to highlight is just going to be focusing on our medical. That is the largest ticket item in our budget. Currently, we have 1,272 eligible employees. Now, not all of our employees take our benefits. Some more so when we have younger generation, they might still be on their parents' insurance because they can be covered up to the age of 26. So anywhere they can get out of not paying, they're going to stay there. So year-to-date average of enrolled employees that we had last year was 1,067. They also are able to cover their dependents. So for spouses, we've had 415 spouses on our plan and 682 children, again, up to the age of 26. So we had a total enrollment of 2,164 employees and family members on our medical and prescription insurance. The average cost, where we're trending right now, per employee per month is $12.32. So we're running a little hot on what the forecasted budget was. We had some 8 high claimants, 3 of them right out the gate when we opened our plan year up last year. So it skewed our numbers, but we are looking forward to a much healthier second part of the year and anticipate that number to come down. Just a little bit of a report card. So some of you that have been on council for a while may recall that we transitioned from a fully insured to a self-insured plan during the 2016-27 plan year. And I just want to provide kudos to you as council for approving that transition, because we have had some remarkable years since then. The medical renewal that we received back in 2016 as a fully insured plan was $16.2 million. So fully insured is like you're paying for your car insurance, your homeowner's insurance. It's a fixed premium, whether you have to file a claim or not. That's what you paid. You don't get your money back. Self-insured is when we are paying for the actual claims that we incur. So going back, $16.2 million is what was forecasted for a renewal rate for fully insured in 2016. For the 24-25 plan year, as a self-funded, it's forecasted at 15.5. So that's a course of 9 solid years that we haven't even yet gotten to that threshold of where we left as a fully insured. And I think that's very remarkable. Even our insurance brokers, year after year, are just kind of jaw dropped that we just have not yet caught that threshold. I think we'll catch it this year because we might go a little over budget. But at any rate, that's very remarkable, and I thank you all for allowing HR when they came forth with that recommendation to go to self-insured, because it certainly has saved the county and the taxpayers a lot of money with our insurance. Total savings over the last 9 years has been roughly $19.5 million. That's a lot of money. How are we able to do that? We had the flexibility in our design plan. A couple of initiatives that we've done in HR. Most recently, we did a dependent audit and discovered 27 ineligible dependents were being covered under our insurance plans, so we were able to remove those dependents. And that estimated about $134,572 in savings. And then this year, we had a spousal surcharge, because if you remember, going back here, we're covering 415 spouses. That's a high number. That's because spouses want to be on Beaufort County's insurance, because odds are it's better than what their employer is providing them. So we have kind of caught up with the times and implemented a spousal surcharge for our employees that have an eligible spouse that have offerings of coverage elsewhere but decide to come to our plan instead. We also implemented, I didn't notate here, but a tobacco surcharge several years back. For any tobacco users, they also have a surcharge, and both of those surcharges are $50 a month per employee. Any questions so far? I don't want to lose you because I know insurance
sir.
sometimes
Go ahead.
isn't.
On the spousal surcharge, you said there were a number of spouses that had insurance from their employer, but they chose ours.
Correct.
And how did we get the savings?
We are implementing a surcharge for the employee to pay an extra $50 on top of their premiums in
Okay.
order to cover their spouse under our plan.
Because they have insurance.
That's right. And that's a very common trend that's been going on in the insurance world. We're just catching up.
Okay.
Any other questions? Okay.
Okay. Well, I'm going to jump into a benchmark study. USI One Advantage is our current insurance broker for the county, and they had conducted a benchmark study at our request. And Hank is passing those slides out for you, and we will go through them here in the electronic deck. Yes, please.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Hank.
Okay. Anyone has a copy? It's not working, though. It's okay. All right, so this is directly from USI. A bit of the data collection overview. They collected data from 4 local municipalities. They also included PEBA, because I think it's important to understand what the state is doing, because there are some county governments in the state of South Carolina that utilize the PEBA health insurance, whereas we are only utilizing the PEBA retirement. The custom entities that they reviewed were Berkeley County, City of Charleston, City of North Charleston, and Greenville County. They also included governments of 1,000 plus employees in Mid-South from their own proprietary benchmark studies that they conduct every year. For this analysis specifically, they included the lowest possible rates that an employee can elect, and they did not include those surcharges that we just mentioned. So when we're looking at these rates, it's not inclusive of any surcharges that those employers may have implemented. Specifically for Beaufort County, they included the employee, child, and family tier that is 3 children or above. So we have a very flexible plan for our employees, not one size fits all. As I mentioned, we have the premium and the medical coverage, but even within those 2 plans, we have several different tiers. You can cover just the employee only, you can do employee spouse, you can do your employee and your children, and we break that out for 1 or 2 children, or the other tier is 3 or more children. And the same idea for family, so that would be a spouse and children. So for the purpose of this study, they focused on the tier level that we're covering 3 children versus 2, which is the more expensive plan for us. They also found that all local participants offer 2 medical options, just as we do, with the exception of North Charleston. They asked that the main focus when we're going through this should be our low option plan, because that is the most heavily utilized plan that we do offer for our employees. All right, summarizing the actuarial value, and I will refer to that as AV going forward, or I will be terribly tongue-twisted with you all today. To compare the aspects of the plan, they reviewed the AV for each. And what this is measuring the relative generosity of the benefits covered by a health insurance plan. So in other terms, they're looking at the entire cost of the components of the plan to be your co-pays, your deductibles, your co-insurance, and your out-of-pocket maximums to determine what's the overall percentage paid by your employer versus what are you paying as the participant out of pocket. According to the AV values that they calculated, the values range anywhere from 64% to 89%. The Beaufort County Premium Plan, which is our high tier option, calculated at 89%, which was the highest. And our base plan had an AV of 87%, which ranked 3rd out of all respondents. For the purpose of an AV, the value of less than Beaufort County means that their benefits aren't as rich. When I mean rich, I'm talking about most favorable for the employee, the participant. Out of all 11 plans, 8 of them were less than our AV, and only 1 plan greater than our base plan. Okay. So the next slide is the numbers that they were able to come up with. So our bar graph shows for Beaufort County, our basic plan, we're looking at the base plan, the lower option first. We came in at 87%. The only other benchmarked participant in this study that came above that is North Charleston. And keep in mind, they are the ones that only offered one plan for all of their workforce. But you can see the one that really stood out to me was the PIBA savings, the state. Their AV for their base plan is 64%. Any questions on how this chart reads? Okay. All right, the next two slides, I won't spend a lot of time on it, but it's good information for you all to have. And I believe the slides that were printed were
Catherine,
3 per sheet.
Could you
Yes,
go back one slide for a second?
sure.
Okay, so okay, I got it. Okay, thanks.
You're welcome.
Let me ask you a question. You use they use the terminology Richard and any other plan. What is richer?
Richer is more, there's more value for the employee, okay? They have a wonderful plan as far as how the co-insurance is laid out, the deductibles are laid out. What is their out-of-pocket cost, essentially, versus how much the employer is paying for that totality of the plan?
Okay. And North Charleston is richer than Beaufort
About 1%, yes.
because of.
Well, let's get into the next two slides, and you'll be able to see that breakdown.
Catherine, I have a question about.
Sure.
Are these counties or municipalities that we're comparing here?
So who USI used, they used Berkeley County, and then they used the town of Charleston and North Charleston and Greenville County. So 2 counties, 2 municipalities, and then the state level with
Why are we
PIBA.
using municipalities to compare?
That is the data that USI was able to get a hold of in the time frame that they had.
Okay.
Well, yeah, they did use a comparable size, but as far as, well, maybe Horry County or York County is not in here, that's the resources they had at the time with the turnaround to do the survey.
And York County's they're on the state plan.
Are they?
Yeah.
And that's a lot of, as I mentioned too, a lot of counties are on the state plan, which would be PIBA,
PIBA.
that green bar.
To answer your question a little bit, that could be a good reason of why they might not be studied, is if they're on PIBA. But the reason that's lower, while PIBA is a good plan, a lot of times the lower premium, as we all have had different insurances over time, might sound good up front, but you might have more out of pocket on the backside, and so these percentages balance those two things out. Because as a young person, one day when I was one, we always wanted that. We wanted that low premium, high out of pocket, because that's where we were. But that's where this plan really balances out for that whole cross section, because we have employees of all ages.
And this slide is health benefits, not retirement.
Correct. We are only talking about health insurance for the current employees.
But we will get to retirement at some point. We'll talk about that, right?
That's
Maybe
the
not
elephant in
today,
the room.
but
What's that?
That's the elephant in the room
Yeah,
that
we
we're
may
gonna
not get to it
have
today,
to
though.
get to.
yeah.
Have I missed something? Where's the elephant?
No.
No, we did bring it up.
I think that we talked about that internally, and I believe that that's going to warrant its own workshop to talk about that.
Oh, okay.
You're talking about retired health benefits, I assume.
Or some
Okay.
type of gap benefit or something.
The gap insurance, yes.
It's on-
Catherine's had, not to jump in, but she's had some initial conversations with them, but I think we want to be very focused in terms of what our ask is.
That is correct. I think it's important to understand what we're offering our current workforce and lay that groundwork of what we have available to our current employees. I do understand that there is a desire to come back to council and talk about the potential of some type of program to implement for retirees. But I think laying that groundwork to understand what we're offering right now, because anything we do offer in the future obviously is going to have an impact on what you're seeing here.
Because
So-
part of what Catherine and I discussed, are we talking about full vested retirees? Are we talking about folks who just get to 8 years under the new system and they get a gap coverage? So there's a lot of questions we kind of need to focus this discussion, if you understand, yeah.
Now, are there any new plans coming out? The one that I am aware of, I believe SCAC is looking to compete with PIBA.
Are there new plans coming out under PIBA is your question, or for us as Beaufort County?
Both.
So I am not aware of any new plans coming out from PIPA, but I would be very interested to know if there are, so I can certainly follow up with that, because I was very shocked with what we're seeing here with what PIPA currently offers.
I do believe SCAC
Okay.
is taking a look at, because they represent 46 counties, combining counties to.
Right. A lot of counties do participate with PIPA, for sure.
Madam Chair,
Yes, sir. I'm
just
sorry.
one question. On this slide, when it says PIBA savings, what is that in particular? Is that a like flex spending account or?
Sure, they offer two different plans like we do. We have a basic and premium, so that's just the name of their plan, but it's the lower base plan.
It's like the low option.
It's the low option.
Sorry to interrupt.
No, those are great questions. That's why we're here.
I'm glad
Mr.
you
Glover,
interrupted.
back to, I'm sorry? Okay, back to your questions. The next two slides, how do they get these values? This is all the information they're looking at. They're looking at their deductibles for individuals and families. They're looking at their co-insurance. They're looking at their co-pays. They're looking at their prescription cost sharing. So the next two slides, and I won't spend a lot of great detail here, because I don't want to bore you all to tears, but if you're curious as to how they got the AV, this is the data they used to find it. They did break it out on two separate tables. I will point that out, because if you go to the benchmark table number 1, you will notice that 2 of these plans have the high deductible, which is what qualifies them to have an HSA, a health savings account. That is different from your flex spending account, which is what we offer. We are not eligible for an HSA because we do not have a high deductible plan. And it would not be my recommendation to have a high deductible plan, because as you can see, that threshold by the IRS on the benefit or benchmarking table number 1 under Charleston HSA is this year $1,650 for a deductible and $3,300 for the family deductible. And that is subject to increase every year. And unless you have those thresholds in your design plan, you're not eligible for HSA.
Any questions?
Yes.
Yes, okay.
On a flex spending plan, is it use it or lose it, or can you carry over?
You can carry over up to 3 months. 3 months. But after that, it is a lose it. And we try to communicate that very hard during our new hire orientation, also sending out some reminders. We're getting close to the end of the year. Amazon now even has a special link to go on to sort and filter just FSA eligible items. So I tell folks all the time, if you're unsure how to spend your money, come sit with me and I can spend it for you. So there's all types of eligible items under FSA
Larry
now.
has another question, too.
Yes.
No,
Oh,
I
okay.
probably do, but not yet.
Not yet, all right.
Okay, great. All right. Okay, well, let's look at the AV values for the high plans, because remember, we just looked at the low option. This is the high plan. So this is where Beaufort County does beat out all of the others that were in our benchmark study. We're at 89%. You do see that PIBA standard plan did jump up to 83%. So their high plan option is greater with the actuarial value. Again, the next chart is our benchmark table 5. That is the data they use to get those AVs for you. So if you are interested to see what are those other participants' individual deductibles, co-insurance, prescription co-pays, that information is available for you.
Do you have employees that are on Medicare that then they use this as their second insurance?
We do.
Do you know a percentage or?
I don't, but I can certainly get that number
I'm just
for you.
curious, yeah. Okay, thank you.
All right, any questions? I know this is a lot of data being thrown at you at one time.
And to follow up what Alice said, is it not true, once you hit Medicare age, automatically Medicare is your primary and your secondary is whatever?
Correct.
Okay.
I think going back on this, those pie graphs or the bar graphs are really where your focus should be. These charts, these tables, this is just the backup data of how they calculated those numbers. Curious. All right, so plans and contributions. The plans that were surveyed here, they range anywhere from a PPO to an HSA to an HRA. So preferred provider organization, that's what we have in Beaufort County. That's your PPO. That's when your insurance, and we have Blue Cross Blue Shield, nationwide network access. That is where they have contracts with the doctors and hospitals for negotiated capped prices of what they can charge for those claims. Your HSA, as I mentioned, that's the health savings account, but you also have to have a high deductible in order to implement HSA. And the HRA is a health reimbursement account. So as I mentioned earlier, they have, the plans were offered of a range from 1 to 2. North Charleston was the only one with just one plan. All the others had 2 plans like Beaufort County does. And the contributions range anywhere from $0 for their premiums up to $520 for family coverage. So the next slide we will look at is what are our employee contributions for their health and medical, their health and prescription on our base plan, our low option plan. The blue graph is for employee only. The orange graph is for if those have a family coverage. So, for example, and these are monthly contribution rates, by the way. And it's also important to note that our tier, our contributions are inclusive of medical, prescription, and dental, whereas everyone else, dental is a separate coverage at a separate cost. So that is something that we are folding into the medical coverage for Beaufort County
And the
employees.
dental is Blue Cross Blue Shield?
It is MetLife Dental.
MetLife.
Mhm.
Okay.
But dental is also an item that can be purchased without medical,
It is going to come with medical.
but it also can be purchased without medical.
Yes, for the employee only, it's free. We don't charge anything, but if they want to cover just their family on dental only, they can do that as well for $17 a pay period.
Right, okay, thanks. For the employee only, though, it's free, eh?
It is free.
Wow, that's great.
Yeah. I want to bring this
That's a
up.
good benefit.
I'm sorry, go ahead, Mike.
That's a good benefit that I didn't have before, so.
Yeah. it's
So you have our dental coverage now?
Yeah.
Great.
Rare benefit.
Yep.
Yeah.
Isn't that relatively rare?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, I would say.
So, and I meant to mention this before I got started in all the data, but you all remember me coming to you on the class and comp, and I used the phrase that we want to be the employer of choice. And that's any HR's dream, and probably administration and council too. And employer choice is not just looking at our salaries. This is a huge piece of a benefit that we're investing into our workforce. We have implemented a couple years ago where employees can log into their employee self-service and see a total compensation report. I think, Ms. Tabb, you were the one that asked about that when you first came on council. And that way they can see a pie chart of, okay, well, yes, this is what I'm bringing home, but this is how much value is in my accrued PTO, and this is how much percentage Beaufort County is paying for me and my family's health insurance. So it's very important, and I usually tell our department heads as you're interviewing and recruiting, we have a nice little one-page flyer that they can use as a recruitment tool because insurance is important and everyone needs it. And so we're offering a very, very great plan to our workforce. Okay. Again, I won't spend a lot of time on these tables. This is just the data that backed up to create the bar graph for you. But you will notice one thing I will point out, that Greenville is the only one that they surveyed that's still fully insured. So we weren't the only one that made the jump from fully insured to self-insured, and probably are reaping the benefits of that. Obviously, if there was a time that we're considering to go back to PIBA, that is fully insured. So we're kind of going back to those flat premiums of what we're paying and getting away from self-insured, which.
Madam Chair, I do have a question.
Yes, sir.
So I understand the self-insured savings. What is the scenario to where, is there a risk that outweighs the savings? Like, is there a particular scenario where being self-insured is riskier than being fully insured? I sincerely don't know the answer.
Outside of what we're paying for it?
Yeah.
No, I wouldn't
Okay.
say so. I think cost is really the biggest driver for folks that want to go to self-insured.
Okay.
It's a great question.
Like I said, I don't know the answer to it.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, even with the fully insured, we still have that flexibility of changing our plan design with how much contributions the employee's making versus the employer. So there's still that flexibility, but overall, it's the cost savings.
follow that question, what kind of comments are you getting from employees as far as their premium is concerned? Are they pleased with it? Are
Oh,
they?
yes. Yes, sir. They are very, that's why you see a lot of dependents covered under our plan. They're bringing their whole family on our plan. And it's probably the generation you ask as well. And it's also probably the folks of their tenure here. So if we have someone that's been with the county for 20 years, they really don't understand what other entities are charging. The younger generation, as I mentioned, they could still be on their parents' plans and they just don't understand. But that sweet spot of those that are just coming to us from another employer, they see this and they are just wowed in orientation of, I've got to go home and talk to my family about this because we're all going to join this plan.
So that is really a marketing tool for us, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. That's why I mentioned with department heads, I encourage them all the time. We create every year a one-page flyer called a Benefits at a Glance, call it the bag, and say, please share this with, when you're doing your interviews and you've got those top 3 candidates, share this with them because sometimes that is the swaying factor. We might not always be able to meet those salary negotiation requirements that we hear, but when they see where they're getting their extra bang for their buck with what's not coming out of pocket to pay for their family coverage of a family of 4, there's your difference in what you wanted in that salary, if not more.
The only other, you have it here, separate. How is the dental plan compared to?
Dental plans are pretty standard. They really are. There's not a lot of flexibility in what you see in the offerings of the coverage, and ours is pretty standard with what anyone else is providing.
Okay. I know I had some
Look,
dental work.
I think the plans are all pretty much the same, but you really have to work it. You really have to understand, in the universe of dentists, who's in your plan and who isn't, and what's going to happen with regard to the choice you make if the dentist isn't there, like, the old root canal system. I mean, it could cost you not too much, or it could cost you $1,400. It depends where the dentist is located. So the benefits are pretty much the same, but the choices you make within that plan are the thing that controls what it's going to cost you. And this is brand new to me. Give you an example. If you are an employee on your own and you get free coverage and you get 2 cleanings a year and you have no problems, that's going to cost you about $250, maybe $300. If you have a family and you're paying $17, that's going to cost you $442, and everybody gets a cleaning, so you're going to save some money. But you may want to consider the overall deal you're dealing with regard to the health of the teeth. You may just want to pay for those 2 cleanings if you don't have to pay for yours. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So it's just a matter of how smart you are once you get all the facts. And I got to tell you, it ain't easy to get in there and just with the dental thing, because everybody's got their hand in your pocket, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
So, but I think we have a good program. It's just a matter of how smart you are in using it.
It's also important to make sure you're using in-network providers. Going back to that PPO I mentioned.
Yep.
Because since we're a PPO, there's an in-network and there's an out-of-network. So if you find a provider for dental, vision, health that's in our network, you're getting those contracted agreement prices where they can't charge but X amount of dollars for certain services.
That's what I was talking about. If you go outside a network, you're at risk of paying more money. You're gonna get the work
Right.
done, but you're just gonna be paying a lot more.
Okay, Hank is giving me the eye here.
Well, this is interesting, Hank. I mean,
It is.
This stuff is vital.
It is.
This is why we wanted to talk about it, because there has been a lot of talk about benefits and insurance and what do we do for others, and we wanted to lay the groundwork to show with real data that we have a good package, right? We wanted you to, because sometimes when we talk about adding something or subtracting something, we always ask the key question, what problem are we solving? And we're trying to show you that this is good.
Yeah.
And it's recognized by data, it's recognized by employees, and by other places.
Madam Chair, just
Yes, sir.
real quick. I know the elephant in the room, so to speak, is the gap insurance of some kind for retired health insurance benefits.
Sure.
I know we brought that up last year. I'm assuming it's gonna be a separate workshop, but just so you know, most of the employees that I talk to are completely fine with doing some type of pay into it
Okay.
in a vesting period. I know there was litigation before.
Sure.
About some of this stuff, which creates another issue. But moving forward, like I said, I know there's still some hurdles to overcome, but most of the employees that I've talked to have been more than willing to contribute
Right.
as an option
Okay.
to have that coverage.
Okay.
And I think
Thank
that
you.
may also help recruiting, but also help people out that have served the community.
So just to understand that, when you enter employment with the county, you would be able to sign up for some type of plan where you could be covered for gap insurance upon retirement, is that?
Yeah, that's kind of the
We're just trying to
spitball.
understand exactly what y'all are.
That's kind of the spitball that I've heard from, especially first responders so far. That's been the bulk of my conversations. But as far as what that looks like or what plan that looks like, I don't know.
Sure.
So,
Yeah.
Well, we've got experts. If we understand all the questions, we can come back to you all
Okay.
with more information. They didn't want to come here and not
No,
really
and
have
I
a good
got it. This
defined
is-
problem.
This is
So-
great information. I
Yeah.
just wanted,
Yeah.
I just wanted to lay that out there from what the conversations that I've had.
Sure. I spoke with our brokers, and we've been working hard on some recommendations. And we spoke a couple weeks ago, preparing them to come here today and kind of push the brakes a little bit to say, we need to understand the parameters a little more, because they could sit up here, insurance people can sit up here and talk to you for 6 hours. Well, you could do this, or you could do that, or you could do this. So it's our job as staff to come, kind of minimize a smaller work group of what are we looking to do, so we can bring the relevant information and stay on track of the topic and not go down rabbit holes left and right. So I promise you, it is certainly an item we are working on.
I know it's a lot
It's
of
coming
hurdles.
soon.
I know it's
Yeah.
a lot of hurdles to overcome, but I just want to bring that up, the
Sure.
conversation I've had.
It's very
Okay.
obvious we have a robust benefits package that is highly desirable when we're recruiting individuals.
Yes.
And we should market that to our employees. As you said, the difference could be coming here because of the benefits we have, but they have to be explained.
That's right. That's right. Okay, we're almost through insurance. We talked about the employee contributions for our low plans. This is a bar graph to show you what's the employee contributions, again, on a monthly basis for our high plan. And also remembering that Beaufort County does provide dental in this cost, whereas the others do not.
Okay.
And again, every bar graph is going to back up table data with how they were able to come with those calculations. The last piece on this is our total employee cost, richness. That was a question earlier with Mr. Glover. What is richness? So the richness determines the employee's out-of-pocket cost. This combined with payroll contributions, you get the total expected cost of health care for your average employee. So when you're looking at the average, how much is someone paying in co-pays, deductibles, co-insurance, and their premiums? That's their total cost. As Hank mentioned, while some of your plans may be offering a lower payroll deduction for coverage, others may have a better AV that we just went through in depth, so you understand what that measurement is. The measurement of the total cost combines those two factors together. And in the next exhibit, I show you a lower total employee cost is considered most favorable, more of a richer plan for our employees and their dependents. So this is our low option, our base plan. The average cost for a Beaufort basic employee only is $130 a month, whereas for the family coverage it's $408. And then you can see the other peers that were surveyed in comparison.
Wow, there's quite a difference in some of those, yeah.
Okay? And then our high plan, average cost, total cost for your employee per month for premium is $227 versus $690 for the family. And then you can see the others in comparison.
I think it's an important point at the bottom there that all other dental is separate, election and premium, so.
Yeah,
important
can't say
point.
that enough, that this is not, the others are not counting their dental costs, but we are.
That's important. Any other questions?
No.
Okay.
Okay, and Miss Sarah, if you don't mind taking me, oh, look at you, great.
Now we're back to. the
We're back
handout.
to just some other personnel items here.
And these are on this handout that, hey, okay, thanks.
Back to our regular slide deck. So some initiatives we're taking in HR, talent acquisition and retention. We are streamlining our hire processes and reducing time to fill. And I've spoken to at least the finance committee here recently on some of those initiatives we're taking. Retention strategies, we are wanting to launch some climate surveys coming in the spring of this year. We also want to focus on our employee experience and well-being. So we will be bringing forth some revised policies for your consideration. One of those includes the refining our remote policy to be more hybrid and have some parameters in place for that. We also want to have some more initiatives roll out with our workplace wellness because, of course, thinking about being a self-insured plan, the healthier we keep our workforce, the lower cost in our health insurance. In addition to, we always strive as an employer of choice to have a happy and healthy workforce. Performance development, continuous learning and upskilling. You guys authorized our procurement of a new software program with NeoGov last year. We've implemented that for applicant tracking, but we've also since then implemented a few more modules for Learn. And then we are in the process of implementing a Perform module that will take place of our current software program that we use for annual performance evaluation. So everything will kind of be housed in a one-stop shop that will make it much easier for our department heads. And then we're also opening up more employee feedback and engagement. Compliance and workforce planning. We're all aware we have new leadership with administration all the way up to the federal level. So obviously those do roll down to updates with compliance and labor laws. So our team will be committed to training and staying up to date with any revisions on that that's issued by the DOL. Also working more with succession planning. The NeoGov system that I discussed with that Perform module has some great features in here that highlights succession planning to help department heads plan ahead and know what to prepare for in the future. And then also pay equity and transparency, and that's where we'll start talking a little bit about the pay scales that we have currently and if there's a desire to go in a different direction.
I have a question, and if you don't know the answer today, that's fine, of course. Remote work, do you know percentage-wise how many employees might be doing remote work? Not the ones that work for elected officials, but direct employees of the county?
So for the county, not counting elected officials, we do not have any employees that are 100% remote outside of elected official staff. The hybrid approach, I don't have a percentage for you, but that is a number that I am tracking down myself by reaching out to departments as we're going through the revisions of these policy to identify who's doing a hybrid approach and what does that hybrid approach look like. How often are you working from home? How often are you in the office?
How many hours?
Exactly.
Okay, great. Look forward to that when you can find all that.
We certainly want all that supportive data before we pull the trigger of changing anything in our plan.
Sure.
So it's kind of working concurrently with one another.
Any questions about this slide?
Yeah, Madam Chairman, two areas of concern. The first one is workplace wellness. How does that look?
So we do not currently have a full wellness program implemented. We have taken some small baby steps we have a wellness coordinator in the HR office. She is actively out pushing out wellness communications, monthly newsletters that relate to wellness topics. She's also initiated physical fitness challenges once a quarter. But in the future, we would like to see a fully implemented wellness program. And it'll have like a bucket list of items that you have to complete to be eligible for your incentive. Of course, we have to be careful with what those incentives look like with county government. We can't, purchase gift cards or things like that, but we do have some flexibility where we might be able to do some premium reductions on your paycheck for what you're paying for your health insurance. So that's kind of the goal we'd like to go down and see a formal wellness program implemented. And some of those bucket list items, as I mentioned, maybe it's going to get your cholesterol check or seeing a primary care physician at least once a year, participating in maybe hosting a wellness event, a health event here at the county, participating in our physical fitness. We can't mandate people to do vaccinations, but maybe if you get your flu shot once a year, you'll check off these boxes, and the more you check, the higher your incentive.
Okay, and I don't want to prolong this too much. So a quick answer, your succession planning, is there any incentive, encouragement to work with current employees as they look at maybe getting into a position for moving up?
Well,
a succession plan?
I think the answer is yes to that. The incentive is, you're able to move up, which obviously puts you in a higher pay bracket and enriches your job more. The encouragement is absolutely there from both departments and the HR office, to the point that we have strategic career path in our NeoGov Learn system, where managers can work with our workforce development coordinator in the HR office to state, hey, this person's shown interest in wanting to take that next step. Let's build out a training path and, lay it out for 6 months, for example, and I want them to go through these specific types of trainings. And that obviously will help them when it comes time to apply for that promotion, to show that they have gone through a career path training
Sure.
program
Okay.
with HR.
Thank you.
Dave?
Great question.
So do you know if we offer a gym pass for employees, like for the county facilities?
So for the county facilities, it is available to our employees now as it is. They just have to show their county ID badge.
Okay.
Yes.
That, I'm sorry,
Yes.
that includes elected officials too, doesn't it?
I believe it does. I'll confirm with Parks and Rec, but I don't
Listen,
see why
I
it
know
would
it
not.
does, because it
Yeah.
works at Island Rec, so. yeah.
Oh, good, good.
Mark, do you have any questions? I didn't mean to ignore you. He's on Zoom, right? I guess not.
No, I'm good, thank you.
All right, okay. All right.
Okay. All right, so I mentioned some policy revisions coming your way. Some new policies that we'll be bringing forth for your consideration is to formalize an actual pay policy. So we do these class and comp studies, we roll them out, but we need to make sure that we are maintaining and managing them. Recommendations were provided in the last study from Management Advisory Group, also known as MAG. So we're going to be refining those into a Beaufort County policy and bring to you for consideration. We also would like to institute an on-call pay. I find out more and more as I go through the daily life in HR that some departments are offering on-call pay and some are not. Some are offering $2 an hour, some are offering $3 an hour. So I'd like a uniform policy for on-call, because we certainly do have departments where on-call is warranted and needed. We provide pre-employment background checks, but we are not issuing biannual background checks. HR used to do that pre-COVID, and it stopped at COVID, and we'd like to reinstate that, but we would like to do so by way of a formal policy, so all of our employees know that you are subject to a biannual background check, and is part of a contingency to remain your employment.
Any questions? No. I'm surprised Larry doesn't have any about the pay.
So we have a policy for self-reporting, but we find that sometimes we don't get a self-report, and then things might come up that are very alarming to us that we had no way of knowing unless we do
Like if
biannual
a
background
driver's
checks.
license required for work or?
Yes, that'll be included in the MVR.
Biannuals, every 2 years?
That's correct.
Yeah, I think, Alice, when we were where we were, wasn't it every 5?
I don't remember.
Yeah, I think it was every 5.
Yeah,
and it
which is
had
a
to be
long
done.
time.
And a lot of times it wasn't, but I think every 2 is,
That's good.
are you doing every 2 now?
We are not doing any biannual,
I think
other than
every
pre-employment.
2 may not be necessary, but I
Okay.
think every 5 is certainly necessary.
Okay, all right.
Okay,
Okay,
all right. Some policies that we have that we'll bring forth for revision, as we've mentioned, the remote work policy, the emergency attendance and pay policy, and cleaning up our conflict of interest policy as well.
what do we have, I'm real familiar with the Hatch Act for federal, but do we have anything similar for county employees campaign type stuff during election years?
We do. It's very clear that it's not to be using any county equipment, county time, county property. It is solely off the clock.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Madam Chair?
Yeah.
I'm probably jumping the gun here, but I saw the Beaufort County Emergency Medical Service wanting to add that fourth shift to the rotation there. Have we talked about maybe doing a 4-day work week for certain employees, but still getting 5 days here in the office? Like, if that makes sense? Like, are there departments?
Like
Kind of like
flexing
an
your-
alternate work schedule.
Yeah, yeah.
off.
Like a 9-hour
Or a
day.
flex Friday. I know my dad, when he was with the federal government, he
Yeah,
worked an extra hour
right.
and got every other Friday off, like, the way it built up.
We have not had discussions far enough to bring something forward to you. Do we offer right now flex scheduling within the departments? Yes, we do. And do I know it's being used? Yes, it is. But as far as a county policy that, hey, every Friday at 2:00, we're closing shop, we have not had discussions to that level.
And I know certain departments obviously need to be open that
Right.
full time period, but I know, I've been reading a lot of studies about the 4-day work week, and, you know, even if the individual employee can have the 4-day work week, but rotate to where somebody's off on Monday and somebody's off on Friday.
Yeah, now that we have.
Okay.
That we do have. Mhm. Okay. All right, so our current salary structure, again, in 2024, we had a class and comp that you all adopted on June 24th. Those salary adjustments were implemented on July 20th. The pay scale that was a part of that is an open range pay scale that has a minimum, mid, and maximum. So items to consider that I believe keep coming up that we want to kind of get a direction from you all is, do we want to move from an open range to a step scale? We had a step scale with Beaufort County from 2015 through 2020, and employees progressed in that scale strictly based on merit. We are currently looking at other counties as to what pay scales they're offering. Before we probably open for discussion, I just want to go over a couple slides here of what are the pros and cons of each. So for an open range, your pros are flexibility. You can adjust your pay based on skills, market trends, and individual performance. Rewarding your high performers, employees who excel may receive larger raises. And competitive hiring, easier to attract top talent by offering competitive salaries within that range. What are some cons of an open range? Subjectivity and potential for inequity. Without clear guidelines, favoritism or bias may affect raises, and I believe that that's probably the biggest concern I hear from most individuals on the open range. Uncertain pay progression. Employees don't have guaranteed raises, which can impact morale, because on a step scale, they can see, hey, on year 3, this is where I should be. On an open range, you cannot see that. Also, budgeting challenges. It is harder to predict payroll costs due to variable increases.
You ready for questions about it, or you want another slide?
That's okay.
Keep going.
Let's do the step scale, and then we'll tackle some questions. So your step scale, pros and cons. Pros, predictability and transparency. As I mentioned, employees know when and how much their increase would be. Fairness and equity ensures consistent pay progression, reducing the risk of favoritism. Retention and motivation. Employees feel secure knowing that they're going to receive periodic increases, and it is easier for budget. Some cons on your salary, your step scale salary structure is there's less flexibility. It does not account for your market changes or individual negotiations. Limited incentive for high performers. It's not, if not combined with performance-based steps, which if we go to a step scale, I absolutely would recommend that it is combined with performance-based. High performers may not be rewarded sufficiently, and potential pay compression. Long-term employees might feel their raises are too slow compared to newer hires.
What does that mean? I don't understand that one.
So when you have your step scales, traditionally, the first half of those steps range anywhere from 2.5% to 3%. The second half of those steps, they start tailoring it back to a lesser percentage. Granted, we all know the discussion, 1% salary or increase on $100,000 is not the same as a 1% on a $10,000. But employees, you know, they're seeing that percentage range, and when they see people starting to get more percentages than they are, they're vocal about it.
Missing the point, but I don't want to belabor it. Well, if it's structured properly, the step scale salary structures work beautifully. It's just a matter of you have to be considerate of your high performers, but for people who, people who don't get promoted can look at a 20-year career and see where they're going to be for the first 3 years at least, every year, and then for the next 3 every 2 years, and then for the next 3, for the steps I'm talking about.
Right.
So, and of course, if you get promoted within that, you're in the middle of the pay range, then you don't start at step 1, you go maybe to step 3. But there's a way to structure this so that it works very effectively, and I think, having come from the federal system, that system, to me, was very clear, and there was a lot of flexibility in it with regard to rewarding people who are high performers with special achievement awards and sustained superior performance awards, which you can't seem to get in this environment that we're operating in, because no bonuses apparently are allowed to be paid, and I guess those would be considered bonuses. They were one-time payments. But you could also, you could skip, I mean, there's lots of ways this could be implemented and for a very favorable salary progression for all employees. And I don't recall, Alice, I don't know if you did, anybody ever complaining that they were being taken advantage of in this step scale
No.
salary structure.
No,
Yeah,
I agree.
It worked really well.
And so if I may, we had it here in the county, as I mentioned, from 2015 to 2020, and it was based on merit. The best research I've done with the federal is longevity plus you had to meet expectations. It wasn't
Oh, yeah.
really
Well, yeah.
exceeding, but you just had to meet.
Very
It's a-
unreasonable to meet expectations.
It's what it didn't segregate it out for your high performers towards just meeting your expectations outside of these one-time lump payments that you referred to. And
Yeah.
it's my understanding as well, Mr. McKellen, that we are not permitted to do that.
Yeah, that's
So
right.
that's the struggle that we hit.
Yeah, oh no, you're right, it would be a hard thing to implement here if there's a statutory prohibition against it, but you could actually skip steps in the program.
And that's what we did. So in 2015 to 2020, we didn't do like the federal with a 10-step.
Yeah.
We did a 21-step scale to allow them, for your high performers, they got to skip a step. Your meeting expectations went up one step. Below expectations, you sat in your step till next year.
Right,
But the feedback I got,
so they could go up annually with a good evaluation? Oh, wow. Okay.
so the feedback and the challenges was that there was some thoughts with some bias going into the evaluations, and you may grade somebody one way, and I'm taking that same exact employee, but in my mind, I'm viewing it a different way, and so your style of management versus my style of management could be the difference in someone getting a one-step increase versus a two-step increase. But there's always going to be that managerial integrity that we are expecting from our leaders, which is why the HR office, as of 2 years ago, has started to provide annual trainings on the proper way to conduct a performance evaluation.
That's
Because
key.
it is very key to ensure that you are being fair and equitable if we are ever going to go back to relating our pay increases to merit.
Okay, I think,
I don't know about that, I think you can eliminate a lot of that with good job descriptions and description of expected duties, making sure people, that they actually execute those duties. And then your sliding scale from, failure to minimal to satisfactory to excellent to outstanding is pretty much the way you can do it. I'm uncomfortable with the 20-step program. I think that's, I don't know. Listen, I don't know if it'll ever happen, so if we're statutorily prohibited, I don't know why we even talk about it if we can't do it.
Well, we could, we just can't, it would have to be moving up those steps based on performance and not the one-time lump sum payments. So, we had it in place before. Could we go back that direction and refine some things? Absolutely. It's a learning lesson for everything we do.
Okay.
So it can be done.
Yeah.
So the core question that we're here, that Joe wants some direction on, when we bring something forward to you, what does the group want to see? Because we really can't do all the scenarios. So the question is, do you want to see how an open range works? Do you want to see if we can make a step system work? That's really the core question.
Yeah, you just can't rely on giving someone a COLA every 3 years.
No.
Someone can't stay at the same salary. There has to be some understanding of how they're going to progress within their career to obtain a higher salary, depending upon the time and the merit, of course.
100%.
So, if people are really, if you only give a COLA every 3 years, people can't get the same salary every 3 years while the whole world's changing around them. Just can't do that.
And
So
let's
Chairman,
hear
just
from-
one last question. When you come back to us, give us the reasons why it was here, and then you got rid of it. What were the reasons why it went away? I don't need to know it now, but
Okay.
yeah. I think
Joe-
Joe was next.
I think what you're asking us, which direction do we think is the best direction? Is it step scale and leave it to you to put together a program and bring it back to us? Or the flex that we have? And
Right. That's the core
personally,
question.
I think the step scale can work. I know in my career, that's what we used, was step scale. But we had possibilities of you being able to change from this scale to this scale. Because in education, it was on the degrees you had. So you move from a bachelor's degree to a master's degree schedule. and you were rewarded that way. We can do something like that because we have individuals that go and take classes to get certifications. That could be an incentive to do those kinds of things. So I would be in favor of a step scale.
Okay.
And this is actually kind of building what you're talking about. Why does it have to be one or the other? Can it not be a hybrid approach between having a smaller range for
Yeah.
particular job categories, but then a step as you progress, and then also maybe like a 5-year look at compression to adjust for that?
So I think what we're hearing is a mix of a time-based
Right.
system as well as a merit-based system.
Yes. I think this was the.
I think your point is well
Yeah.
taken. Certain jobs are going to lend themselves to a step scale.
Right.
Because your job entitles you to get education, to do other things, and you can be rewarded that way. Some other jobs are, pretty standard. And how do we pay you
Right.
adequately?
Yeah, and when you got the step scale, I mean, it works beautifully. And if a COLA comes in, the whole step scale changes.
Yeah, it
Right.
changes anyway.
It adjusts
Immediately,
with your-
everybody's got a different thing, and they still have the ability within that step scale to advance within the steps. And the COLA is just a gift, and then it changes the salary immediately.
Do you think you got the direction
I
that you
think
need
so.
from us?
I
Okay.
think so.
And,
Yeah, I
Madam
think
Chair,
we're
if I may
good.
say one thing, I really do think somewhere in there we need to have a way to look at the compression for the longer term employees.
All right.
So I don't know what that looks like.
Well, that's what
Well, and that's, what we did in this last study is to fix that. And now it's just important that we maintain a standard going forward so we don't end up back in that situation
Because I
again.
know that was a huge adjustment for a lot of folks.
Yeah.
Madam Chairman, just want to make one comment. I don't have a problem with various style of evaluations.
Uh-huh.
If that's the way you evaluate an employee, do so, but as long as you are consistent.
Right.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
100%, yes. And those are very
Measurable.
good key points. And anytime we do these trainings, I invite anyone to come sit down to see what message we are giving to our managers. And consistency is, we highlight it everywhere.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, let's
Okay.
go. Keep going.
All right, just a quick overview of personnel summary. We have a current FTE count. And I mentioned this in the Finance Committee week for those that were there, 1,549. Current positions, so head count 1,621. Vacancy count was 237, although we did hire 12 people yesterday. Administration is currently reviewing new personnel requests that were submitted by the department, so you will have more information on that later through the budget process. What are we recommending this year? So staff is recommending a COLA because we don't have our pay scale right where we want it yet, so we don't want to miss the opportunity to reward our employees. So we will be recommending a 3% COLA. How did we come up with that? Like previous years, we have reviewed the CPI data. Elected officials will receive the county or state adjustment, whichever is the greater of two, and that is by way of ordinance. Additionally, we are recommending, if we go forth with a 3% COLA, we're recommending to increase our bands by 1.5%, not the full 3%, to allow those people at the beginning of the band to progress and get off the start line. If we match it dollar to dollar, they're still sitting on square one, and new hires are making the same thing they are. So that is kind of what we're like to see if we go with the COLA, so we don't create compression right in year one out of the gate.
Okay.
Madam Chairman,
You lost me there, where a new hire can make the same money as someone who's been here 10 years.
No, not 10 years, but if someone's been here 1 or 2 years, they just got hired last year at the
Yeah.
minimum rate. And if we jump our pay band up by the 3% COLA, and that new hire that's been here for 1 to 2 years also gets that 3% COLA, your new hire is going to get the same amount because that's the new minimum on that pay range.
Well, that's the pay range for the job.
But it's going to build compression, and compression is very hard to do. So when we get through these studies in 4 years, you're going to find more people are, I've been here for 3 years and I've been here for 6 months, and we're making the same amount of money.
Yeah, but if there's a COLA granted and the job gets elevated because of the COLA, people, with a step, okay. If they're there 6 months, you can't really argue about that, but if someone's somewhere for a year or 2 or 3, they should be advancing. And their COLA would raise them to a different level than someone that comes in as a step 1 if they're a step 3. But if someone's still a step 1, too bad. They won't be a step 1 at the end of their first year of employment. But for 6 months, they may well be. So are you saying if someone comes in 6 months later at the salary that they already have, that there's a problem with that?
Not necessarily.
I
I'm
don't think
stating
there
that
is.
as of July of last year, for all the employees that came in, brought up to minimum, and there were a lot of employees that were brought up to minimum of the new pay
Oh,
scale.
okay, that's, yeah, okay.
Because we
I
we
get it.
just increased our scales last year, which gave a big jump. They're still sitting there,
Yeah, I
even though
get
they
it.
might have only, they
Yeah,
could have been here for 2 or 3 years.
Most of the time, you serve, you know, if you're in a position for a year, you should automatically, under a step scale, you should automatically, at a satisfactory level of performance, advance to the next step. But your anniversary of your hire is different for everybody, so you don't not everybody's finishing their year at the same time. So that person will advance out at the end of their year, and the other person's still at the lowest salary until they finish their first year. So there's not an anniversary day like January 1st, everybody gets a promotion. That doesn't happen. It shouldn't happen, is the best way to say it.
It shouldn't. We do our COLAs once every year.
Well, COLAs are a different story.
And-
That's an imposition on the entire pay scale. Everybody gets that. I'm talking about advancing within the steps. Everybody has a different anniversary date. You only advance when the anniversary of your hire date appears.
And that's one of those revisions, if we go back to step scale of what lesson learned. It's my recommendation, if we go back to a step scale and we're moving people, progressing them in their steps based on merit, we should do it at the time of their anniversary date, not
Right.
once a year, because what we were doing was once a year. And I believe there's some budgeting software in place now that can help them forecast, because I know that obviously adds a few more layers in
Yeah.
their forecasting methods of how do you forecast a year out for
Yeah.
1,400 people. So there's a lot of work and collaboration with
No doubt.
multiple
Yeah,
departments.
no doubt about it.
Okay, all right, next.
That was all.
What it would
Yes, I
cost
believe
us?
that's, I'm
Okay.
done.
It's a little out of order, I'm gonna have Pinky come tell us what that 3% would cost you.
Are we allowed to have a break here?
Yeah, so yeah, that was my next question. Do you want to take a break now,
Yes.
or do you want to let Pinky say the numbers and take a break?
That's why I
before
brought it
John?
up.
I think it's
10
time to
minutes,
take a
5
break.
minutes, whatever you want to do.
I
How
would
much
wrap
time you
this
give us?
up.
5 minutes?
Let's wrap this.
7.5 minutes.
Wrap this part up and then take it.
Yeah, this is just the numbers behind it.
She's going to talk about the cost of the 3%.
John will take a break.
Oh, okay. I thought Pinky was up for an hour.
Oh, no, this
No.
is just one.
I don't have that much, I promise. Oh, sorry.
Thank you, Kath, that was excellent.
Yes.
A lot of things
Yeah,
to think
really,
about.
that was good. Thanks.
So as Catherine mentioned, our recommendation for fiscal year '26 budget planning is a 3% cost of living increase. And this is what it would cost us. The current salary roster, and we use the date of January 13th because personnel is a moving target, so people come on board, people off board. So 64 million is the number that we had as of January 13th. And of course, this gets updated right up until we present the budget to you, so the number will change. Just like she mentioned, we hired 12 people yesterday, so that number will change. 3% at that time would have been $1.9 million, and this includes all funds, general funds, the split between special revenue funds, as well as the enterprise funds. You see the new total will be a little over 66 million. We also applied the 3% because we have about $10 million worth of vacancies. We use the same date because we've not reviewed our new personnel requests and done an FTE audit, for lack of better terms, to be able to determine which positions will be reclassed that are currently listed on the vacancy roster versus funded for the new fiscal year. Note, these figures do not include the sheriff's, magistrate, or the DSN consumers because they do not participate in our Compton class. So, any questions?
Yeah, I have a simple one. Did you
Besides
do
a break.
this as an independent computation?
Sorry?
Did you do this as an independent computation for the employees in Beaufort County
Yes.
and reach the 3% level?
The 3% that we came up with is based on current roster, yes.
Because, every October, the government, the big government, does a Social Security adjustment and a federal pension adjustment.
Right.
And they do a big computation, and I think this year it was, what's Social Security, 2.8? Was that what it was? Anybody remember?
Yeah, I think
That's
It's like I think it's like 2.5. It's military pays, retirement's tied to
And
it.
that's effective January
Not
1st
yet.
for the whole country, or whoever's on those programs. So I'm just wondering why you're bothering to do this when you could just use that number? Or is this a better number, or is there a reason why you have to go through the trouble when someone else is already doing it? And the rest of the world gets the 2.8, and we're giving 3.0. Now, I'm not picking the 0.2 of a point here problem. I'm just wondering, why are we different from?
Well, historically, we've normally followed what the state is doing, and they're still in the middle of determining between 2 and 4. They have only had the House Ways and Means discussion right now.
Or is it not in line with the Social Security rates or the other?
The state's separate from, yes, the
Right.
federal side. They
So
do
we're
their
just-
computation separately.
Well,
We
they come up with
started-
Okay.
We started building
Which they
based on
haven't
the-
decided
My
that.
question.
Well, because they're budgeting for a July 1st fiscal year,
Right.
whereas federal side is October 1st fiscal year.
Got it. Okay. I was trying to save you some work here,
I
but
appreciate that, thank you.
it seems to be
I have
a
enough to
simple
do.
thing. We'll do what they did, but
Right.
you really have to look at what, I mean, is the state gonna do something different? What if theirs comes in higher?
We won't have a budget set yet.
Right, we started with the
We can make an
3%.
adjustment if we have to.
Could adjust it.
Exactly.
Okay.
All right, thank you.
All right, so let's take a break.
7 minutes?
7.5 minutes. Yeah, I mean, my watch is fast. That's by design because I'm late, so let's look at the real clock. Let's be back at 11:35.
It's
10:35. 11:35. See you there.
That's 10 minutes. That's 10 minutes.
Come back in an hour.
Yeah.
Are we gonna be out here by
Thank you.
12 o'clock?
I am.
There it is. Somebody, you skipped ahead and read it a little bit. Talk about what is adding a fourth shift to EMS and how does that fiscally impact us? This is not something that we're going to spend tons of time on, but it needs a full explanation of what it is and how much it costs, and that would be something we would potentially bring back in a budget. John. He brought a lot of paper, but I've got a hook if he gets rambling.
You said that before.
Yeah, it didn't work so well the first one.
I wouldn't dare do that to Catherine, but John's in trouble.
Yeah. I got all those for him. Miss Howard,
Yes, sir.
Mr. Holbert says we need to call the meeting back into order.
Oh, okay. I didn't dismiss this, but, all right, the meeting is back back on the workshop.
Thank you so much. All right, so I passed out a paper for each of you. I'm going to try to be very short, but the brevity, don't mistake the brevity for the importance of the topic that we're going to talk about. I'm going to quickly identify the problem, identify the solution that our EMS staff and I have been working on. They have been working on this for about 2 years. It took them about 6 months to get me on board with this program, and now 18 months later, we're finally prepared to present this to you. And then finally, I'll talk quickly, some justification for where we are, and then answer your questions. There's lots of information in the 4 or 5 pages I presented to you. Beaufort County EMS responders are physically and mentally exhausted. This exhaustion, and physical and mental exhaustion, leads to employee injuries, increased use of sick time, increased use of overtime, increased risk to our capital equipment, and most importantly, can lead to increased risk or mistakes in patient care. The Beaufort County EMS responders currently work in 3 rotating shifts of 24 hours on duty and 48 hours off duty. Right now, we have 14 vacancies in paramedics. We have some EMS or EMT vacancies, as well as some part-time vacancies. That totals 26 vacancies in the organization. There are 27 responders on each shift, if that helps. So right now, the total employee count for the department is 104, including all their administration and that, and we should be around that 130 number of employees, just to let you know where we are. To combat this, Beaufort County EMS desires to change to the shift schedule, adding a 4th shift of personnel. So what we're asking is for your support of adding the funding to increase that, increase the salary, the cost of those 27 employees to add that 4th shift. The addition of 27 employees for the 4th shift is expected to increase the overall budget for EMS of $702,000. That $702,000, so we talked about this the other day in the Finance Committee. I worked with Pinky very closely in the last couple of days to refine that number. The $702,000 is as compared to the previous actual budget. There's in the documentation you'll read through there that I have a little paragraph that says 4 shift by the numbers, and you'll see that the total cost, I've broken down what that cost is for the salaries, what the benefits cost. That was the hard one to capture to make sure we had that right. The other expenses, and then a reduction in overtime. The biggest way we are saving these dollars is the current overtime budget. This year, we're budgeted just over $3.2 million for overtime. 55% of that is used to backfill shifts for people that have call-outs or have experienced a traumatic event during their shift and need a couple of days to decompress. So for the majority of our EMS responders are not working 24/48, they're working 48/24, and it is taking a toll on the staff. Addition of the fourth shift will reduce the physical and mental stress on staff by offering a more favorable work-life balance. The net effect has proven to increase performance and decrease risk. The fourth shift rotation will improve retention and attract the most skilled paramedics and EMTs to our organization to ensure Beaufort County remains an employer of choice amongst its agencies. Briefly, I'll tell you about a couple of case studies. So throughout the paper, I identify several other local agencies who have already converted to this shift. And I'll talk to you for just a moment the reasons why. I identified those right up front. It is that work-life balance, making sure that our responders have an opportunity to recover after a long shift. I detailed what a shift looks like for them. The average shift in Beaufort County for an EMS employee is they respond to about 5.3 incidents per day. And you don't think that's so much until you calculate the time that it takes for them to respond. It's about 3.5 hours per incident, or almost 18.5 hours a day that they are physically providing a service or providing the recovery that it takes to do that service. So anything from report writing to restocking their vehicles, all that kind of stuff. So in an 18-hour day and that type of stressful job, there's only a few hours left for the other things they have to do, like maybe get some rest, maybe find some lunch. And there's no guarantee that those few hours left in the day are all aligned with one another. They're going to get an hour at 2 a.m. and an hour at 3 in the afternoon and maybe an hour here. So this is a very challenging for our responders, especially when they're frequently having to work the backup shift. They do this for 24 hours, and then they have to do it again the following day. I talk about some research that we do internally and the effect of that. We do a near-miss reporting system, and I talk about that. We see inside our own organization that the trend of near misses increases around that 36-hour mark. So when our staff members are asked to work those 2 back-to-back shifts, that potential for medical errors or mistakes or driving incidents or anything else significantly increases. So all of these are reasons to justify this request. Aiken County went through a similar issue in 2022. They did a whole bunch of studies. They implemented this program in May of 2023 and immediately saw a change. I will send you that information electronically so you can read it because it's pretty large. Just this Sunday, the Charleston Post and Courier wrote an article about Charleston County EMS. It was exactly where I think we will be if we don't do something different in the next year. I think those 2 organizations reached a point of crisis, did a bunch of evaluation, and are making changes now. We have the opportunity to make changes before we reach that level of crisis. So that's what we're asking you, is to support the addition of that 4th shift for Beaufort County EMS in the form of, when it comes forward in the budget, we need your support for that.
Okay, Mr. Passman, Councilman Passman.
Absolutely agree with you that this is needed. The real challenge is, where do you get the bodies to fill the 4th shift?
Yes, sir.
That's going to be the real challenge. We just heard about our benefits package, how good it is. I would think our own EMS staff are going to be our best recruiters because they talk to EMS staff all over the state.
Yes, sir.
And they may be the ones that say, look, we're going to have a better life, come with us.
Well, you're absolutely right. I've spoken to the EMS director several times, and we're fortunate that much of our executive staff in EMS, they work, they go to all these trainings and conferences and things like that, and a lot of our staff are so experienced, they often are the judges for competitions and things like that. So they have this network of folks. I can tell you that we have staff members now who are seeking that improved work-life balance and waiting for Beaufort County
From other-
to make this opportunity before they leave. There are others that work at other agencies that are waiting for Beaufort County to make this change so that they can come on board. And no longer are we competing with just local, I mean, within driving distance. We're competing with North Carolina, with Georgia, with Tennessee. Because if someone is going to make the change to go to a different place, they're just going to up and move. So we will attract folks to Beaufort County EMS from all over.
Yes, Ms. Tabernet?
So right now, we have vacancies.
Yes, ma'am.
And we have a rich benefit package.
Yes, we do.
So why do we have vacancies? If we're such a good county to work for, why do we have vacancies? And around us, they're not at the 2472, correct?
Yes, there are several that are at 24/72
Close to
now.
us? Who?
Yes, ma'am. Well,
I think-
there's a list in there.
I saw the list.
That I laid them out.
Agencies pull, that, I see the list of who pulls from us. That means they're all on 2472?
Yes, all the agencies that I listed in the report are currently on 24/72.
I think we've
So
lost some.
Aiken, Abbeville, Marlboro, Fairfax, Calhoun,
Yeah,
Edgefield,
we've
Chester,
lost
there are a number that are there.
So most of those are pretty small.
They are.
But so why are we having trouble recruiting? Is it the low base pay? I mean, we have good benefit package, we just got done discussing it.
Right.
So, and we're a big county and there's lots of opportunity. Is it because our base pay is low?
I don't know if that, there's a combination of factors. So all of these have to do with, of course, first, we're talking about work-life balance. The compensation is always is always a reason for recruitment. Now, I'm not going to say that that's 100% of our problem. Our benefits package is incredible. Beaufort County is a great place to live and work. I also talk about the number of calls per day that our responders go to. So if they have an opportunity to go to a competitor whose compensation and benefits are similar, but their workload when they're on shift is significantly decreased,
Because
Hey,
it's a
John.
smaller place.
because it's a smaller response area, the less number of calls.
You may want to speak to the overtime piece of this that we
I
talked
saw
about.
the overtime
Yeah,
in
it's a
there.
tremendous amount of
Didn't you make an
overtime.
adjustment
Yes.
recently on base pay specifically for EMT? Didn't you just raise the salary?
I think 4 years ago,
No.
it was several years, it was before I started.
Before COVID? Nah.
Somewhere around there, I think so. 3 years ago, 4 years ago, there was a significant increase.
I have a question, which is an excellent report, but the other thing is I don't know the amount of time they spend training, but they do a lot of training just to keep their
Yes,
their
ma'am.
skills, and that's not counting the 18 hours per shift that they're on the 5 calls,
Yes.
5+ calls that they get.
So the state requirement for training for continuing education is they have to be off-duty to do that training, so they don't take away from their daily work. So we do a week of training once a month in rotating shifts that they also attend.
Yeah.
So it's a minimum of 3 hours a month that they do just in that alone.
Okay. Any other comments?
Just one last
questions? Yes, sir.
thought. First of all, Mr. Robinson, thanks for, this is directly gonna, if I hear you correctly, it's gonna help the people that we serve. And two, your staff, the whole staff is for this, correct?
Yes, sir.
I was at Beaufort Memorial yesterday and had to spend some time there. And their beds are completely filled. EMS is in and out constantly. So I get that
Yes,
5
sir.
per 6 per day. And anything you can do, or anything we can do to help you, help them, let us know.
Well, thank you. Thank you very
Appreciate
much.
that.
Yes, sir.
Madam Chair. I know 24-hour shift is kind of the standard, but if we add that 4th shift, is there a way to maybe drop it down to 12? Would that help with anything, or is 24-hour the best? I mean, you know it better than I do, but.
It is, so 24 hours right now for our call volume is the right number.
Okay.
There are some very large agencies who reduce their shift hours to 12, like New York City, because of their call volume is so large. And when I talk about large, we're talking 26,000 employees for one organization. So that's huge. They at some point don't even have stations, they just have a post, and they don't have to wait for calls. They stack up.
And I
So
guess-
it's a much different
No,
organization.
and I got you. Like I said,
Yes,
I
sir.
trust your expertise on this. I guess my other question is, Does this need to come before the Community Services Committee or the Finance
Or
Administration?
Finance.
Administration.
Because of the budget amendment?
Administration
Yeah.
and the budget.
Yeah.
mhm.
All right.
Well,
Yeah.
we can certainly come forward and have more discussion at committee if you want to do that.
Well, I think the administration will push it forward to us.
Yeah.
As part of the budget.
Certainly, this is absolutely needed. What do we know? We know we're increasing in population.
Yes, sir.
And
So there's
aging.
gonna be more services needed. That's just a fact of life.
Yeah.
Our state is growing, our county is growing. We have to service the people correctly.
And if you guys choose to move this, which we'll bring forward to you, we did do a sign-on bonus for EMS and first, that's what was a couple years ago. Yeah, we did sign-on bonus, really didn't move the needle as much, but I think this is the next natural progression. So,
There's an opportunity now with the 26 openings that we have right now to,
In the next budget.
to technically advertise that we're going to make this shift, and we
Okay.
can begin to do that now. But the risk that I have is to talk to my EMS director and say, go and do this, and if it's not improved in the budget, we don't get to take it back.
Yeah, I'd like
So
this
that's
to
why the
come.
conversation we
let's
need to
wait.
have, and some kind of formal recognition or approval from committee and council that this is the direction we want to go.
I'd like it to come to finance or wherever you're gonna put it, because I'm not convinced. So you're gonna go a long way to convince me, I'm sorry. It's got nothing to do
That's
with
all right.
them, but the volume of calls differs per station.
It does.
Like, I know Station 34 is on the roll all day, every day in
Yes, it
Sun
does.
City. But the type of call is very different than what might happen on St. Helena. This is lift and assist. That's not a 3-hour call. That's not a 3-hour paperwork.
Yeah,
And then
I
my-
do describe that in there. There's a whole section that talks about how the averages work out. I'm happy to talk with you.
Yeah,
these
it's
are,
in the-
these are exactly the conversations we'll have in the follow-up at a committee.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
And
But
send
just
us
to be-
that detailed report too, John. That would be great. Send us that.
it all to you,
along Okay. with
the couple of articles that are there, so you'll
Yes, sir. Mike?
I was just going to say, just to be clear, this is something we work through the budget process for the
Right.
next fiscal
Right.
year
All right.
for consideration.
Yeah.
And so I have a summary slide just to make sure that where we are is where you guys want us to come out of this session with. So we've talked about bringing the 3% COLA forward. We've talked about the idea of the EMS schedule shift. And on my paper, I scratched through open range and circled step with hybrid system of what you want us to kind of bring back an option with.
Yeah.
And then the list of handbook policies that she listed in her presentation. The last thing I put on here was a potential follow-up meeting on ideas with retiree insurance.
Yes.
Anybody object to any of that?
No,
Okay.
perfect.
All right, we're ready to go to the next step?
All right.
Next, okay?
I'm going to hand this off to my other personality, so I'm just going to stay here. This is in facilities. We're not going to go down deep, but we need to really change how we name things and how we look at spreadsheets. So we're going to have to change our vocabulary a little bit. Right now, when we see capital improvement, CIP, there's a perception. Some people think that's all new buildings. Some people think that's existing buildings. Some people think, nobody thinks that buys software. Not everybody knows that buys cars and equipment. So what we've talked about is how do we change our terminology? My script didn't work here, Hannah. It's not your fault. I'm glad you wouldn't have liked the cursive, it was ugly. So next, existing facility is something we need to separate out. We have, as I'll get to in a minute, 131 buildings. We spend at least half, and I'm going to back up and say, we're going to come up here and say, we don't have enough money, you guys don't spend enough money, and that's part of the discussion, but not really. In the last 3 years, county council has more fully funded. If you look back farther, there was almost an ignoring of existing facilities at some time. In the past few years, county council and administration have been catching up. And so what we've done now is, with some leaps, done some big projects. Roof on this building, expensive. HVAC on this building, expensive. Major HVAC replacement at the courthouse, very expensive. Building the Arthur Horn building, et cetera. We've really played good catch-up, and our staff is doing a good job. And because of these last few years, what we really need in all these areas are a more consistent funding, and that's what we want to talk about, and it'll be something we'd bring back in the budget process. of how do we, instead of lumping this big number, this is what we're going to do for CIP, and having a grasp for fleet and a grasp for maintenance of buildings, and we need to buy a couple new buildings. And, oh, by the way, this also covers our purchase of software. And so the reason I say purchase of software is, in our definition, Pinky's definition, as a finance person, a capital expenditure is simply something over a certain number. And so that's why we need to talk about what are these funds, or what are these things. One is existing facility fund. We can, some call it a reserve fund. Some people even have dedicated millage on their bill. And what that does potentially is establish a transparency to the citizen that that's what they're paying for, and also establishes a discipline for staff that that's what they're using it for. So that's, but that would just be an option that we would bring back. A second one, we have Parks and Recreation. Yes, we have impact fees. But we have a tremendous amount of facility needs that I'll cover in just a second that are just waiting on impact fees. We've got master plans on the book we'll talk about in a second. Parks and Rec has been also a substantial user, in a good way, we need to, it's active for some of these new construction that comes from impact fees, but a lot of the existing facility maintenance and improvement. Charles Lynn Brown, example, repairs at other places, et cetera, like community centers. And the last with the capital, let's define capital as new things. Anything we build new or add on to something, that's building capacity, we would then in future discussions talk about that as a true capital expenditure, capital fund expenditure for you guys. So without going down that too much farther, does that make sense?
Any questions?
No,
Definitions?
Those are good definitions.
So next, so 131 buildings, 900,000 plus square feet. Our current person in charge of facilities is doing a great job of building this inventory and building plans for long-term 2-year, 5-year, 10-year maintenance. But long-term, we're going to need to have we need to know that in 3 years, however we delineate it, we're going to, whether it's a dollar amount or a millage equivalent or whatever that might be, that there's going to be $5 million a year. So I know that I can fix these priorities this year. And I know that the third year, I'm still going to have it there. So that third priority year stuff is still going to get done, so we can properly plan. So what we would recommend, and we'll come back throughout the budget process, and if there's a follow-up on this, is we need to we won't know all the answers in year one. We do have history. We know what we've spent over the last 3 years, and we could come in with a year one funding, but we don't want to guess. Only on year one potentially would be an estimate. And during that year, we would have an estimated number plus fund a true, we've done master plan, facility master plan, but that was really for space needs. It wasn't a true status evaluation of each building. We've done a lot in-house, but it would be great to have somebody come in and say, here, all these buildings are in A, they can be in year 4. This situations are B, they can be in year 3. These are your things, et cetera, to the now. And so we would ask, and we'll talk about this during that process, if you should so desire, would be to come back, ask for a number this year, but then in future years, try to get it where it's a true, solid, consistent number going forward so we can plan.
Absolutely.
Madam Chair, sorry. Out of that 131 buildings, is there any room for consolidation? Do we need to expand? Do we know how many are occupied, actually fully occupied?
Almost all are occupied, not every office in every single building. But these are busy, active buildings. Part of that space needs assessment when we did the facility master plan talked about consolidation of buildings, et cetera. And it sounds good, but to build these consolidated buildings, as we're seeing with Public Works, until we have now readjusted, which we'll bring back to you this year, we're talking about $30, $40 million buildings, as opposed to a lot of our buildings are good. I mean, you guys had a council meeting at Hilton Head at the library. That's a nice building, but that roof needs to be replaced, and that's expensive because you can't just slap shingles on a building in Hilton Head. So these are things that we have to plan for, but I understand what you're saying. I mean, over time, we will definitely look at that as people, I mean, there's a useful life of a building. And if you know that you have 5, 6, 7 years of planned maintenance, you know when something's dying. We have time to then build it into a replacement plan on the capital side.
And the only reason I'm asking is if there was a way to consolidate and sell some of these off and put it back into the fund for maintaining the current buildings.
Right.
Because I know that one building down in Hilton Head, we just did a lease agreement on it.
we
It's
talked about it.
pretty much vacant.
But that's not actually true. We have probate, probation and parole.
Outside agencies.
The Mitchellville is now.
Mitchellville is there, but there's also Veterans Affairs, Clemson Extension,
But the treasurer, assessor, and auditor do
David,
not
they're all
use it
coming back
anymore.
now. They're
We're good.
using
Yeah,
that
the
pretty
two-
well.
I know when we went and saw it, it was.
Right, the two missing
Like-
components right now are where those two, the most visible places, right in the front where the treasurer and auditor were.
Right, just either,
Yeah.
yeah, but it's
Right.
occupied.
Oh,
Yeah.
good.
Okay, go ahead, Councilman.
I think this is essential. Certainly, a study has to be done of the buildings so that you can develop the plan that you're going to need for the annual expenditures to fix the roofs, the windows, HVAC, interior doors, those kinds of things that go after a period of time so that you know these 3 buildings this year need roofs.
Right.
And you can't do that without an extensive look at all 131 buildings.
Are you, go ahead, Tom.
I just want to jump back to what Mr. Bartholomew said. The auditor and the treasurer are the questions that we want to try to bring back those services to our people on Hilton Head, because we have a lot of the older people, and why do we want them to go over the bridge for this? So, Hank, that's a key thing that we want to focus on.
Well, I think they'll have to.
That's something
let us
outside
know.
of our control.
I understand that, but I'm saying,
Right.
but listen, these people, we have to report to them, though.
Got
How
it.
much do you think a maintenance inventory survey plan would, that seems like the first step.
I agree. So we will bring that back. That's why I wanted to ask about it now in this early February meeting, so that we can have real numbers when it comes time to build that budget.
And what he's saying is we would base on historical for this first year, but also fund the study.
Fund the
As part of the
study, too.
budget.
Right.
Madam Chair.
And one of the reasons we want to do the
Let
study
somebody else
is
talk,
for
please.
insurance purposes as well,
Got it.
because
Yeah.
that's how our insurance is based upon.
Okay.
Okay, so as you know, I'm a proponent of this. I think it also offers transparency to our residents, so they understand we're planning forward with a reserve study. My guess is we're gonna hit $100,000 or more for that. Little Sun City's 30 grand, but it offers a planning tool, and our people know that we're not haphazardly waiting till that building leaks and then we fix it. So I love the plan, I love the idea, and I love talking about a capital fund, a Parks and Rec fund. I think it gives clarity to our people.
So you're gonna bring us back.
That would come back in a budget process or workshop, however you guys would want to do that. But
Yeah.
to your point to the study, while it does cost money, by fixing things proactively,
It's
we
good.
save a bunch of money in the end.
Proactive,
Yes.
yes.
And
Is it,
to-
and
And to
we,
David's point, once you take a look at the buildings to see which buildings we have and the condition of them, the secondary thing we have to take a look at is how many pieces of property do we have?
We're going to
And
talk
what is
about that at the end of
condition
this.
them?
Yeah, we're going to talk about that at the end of the session today.
yeah.
So I think this is all good. Everybody's on board with moving forward to the next step.
Yes.
Just so you know, this is to just kind of pile on a little bit. Some of these are big ticket maintenance issues. We don't need to dwell, but we know how much money we've spent. And let's just go to administration in the middle, because I just mentioned the roof and the HVAC, and we have a 34-year-old boiler that heats this building, by the way, that we want to replace this year. And we're getting ready to do $1 million upfit, which then makes it a new building. So that it gets it off the reserve list, et cetera. Myrtle Park is due. We have an elevator modernization program for this building, that building, and another building as well.
I know.
Because the elevator is a nightmare. But we also, our facility staff found to modernize these elevator systems and not completely tear out and replace, which is going to save us about 50% of what the cost would have been. So the staff has really done a good job on that. Parks and Rec facilities, I told you, they get as much wear and tear as just about anything, except for the last one that I'm going to talk about, and I'm going to hand it over to John for a very short explanation. But our facility staff is in that building right now at the detention center.
How old is Myrtle Park?
I don't know the number on that, but that's a building that is basically full,
It looks like it's, yeah,
but it's,
stretching at the
Yeah, so-
seams there.
was 2008, so 2010 maybe?
so 15 years old.
It looks wore out.
Yes, so John will come talk about a detention center, but while he's coming over there, I'm just going to tell you that our staff is over there all the time working on issues with plumbing and clogging, and when you think, well, the building is only 30-something years old, but it's actually about 90 years old because it operates 24/7. I think somebody had sent something out about that. And he's going to show you some pictures. I'll bring up his props. They're currently in the building digging up the floor and replacing the drain pipes because it's old cast iron sitting on dirt. And so we are going to maintain it, but that becomes something, when you do your reserve study, is we need to, if you decided today to do something else, law enforcement center, do something there, it's going to take 5-6 years to do it. We got to maintain and keep this operational because it affects its capacity.
So everything that Hank just said. So what we have here are a couple of pieces of plumbing that have been pulled out of the floor. That plumbing is, we put it in boxes because it's drain pipe and we don't want folks just kind of touching it. But it is galvanized material, so that's 3.5-inch galvanized material that's really designed to last 80 years. That plumbing is 33 years old, and it is crumbling everywhere throughout the building. So on the screen, you can see an example of, this was just last week. You see the wheelbarrow full of plumbing right there? Every bit of that plumbing looks just like this. It is crumbling. There are 2 guys down in that hole, and what you can't see is they have had to tunnel underneath the walls. So as you can imagine, the detention center is built out of concrete. So all of this plumbing for them to access is cutting through all of this concrete. In the last 6 weeks, we've spent just about $80,000 to replace 52 feet of plumbing.
Wow.
Every time our staff goes in there to conduct this work, they find more problems. Currently, the detention center has 14 cells out of service. Most of those cells that are out of service are due to plumbing issues. One of the housing units, which normally would have 4 showers for 32 folks, is down to 1. 3 of those showers are out of service with dirt coming up into the shower pans because there's nowhere for it to go. This problem is on the first floor in the kitchen area. It just happens to be where the drains go through, but these types of problems affect the entire building. What I want to do is just give you a very quick summary. What we're asking to do today is to work together to develop a strategy now, a funding strategy now for the replacement of this detention center in the future, within the next 4 or 5 years. We would really need to meet that window. As Hank said, we're doing all the work we can now to maintain its operational status. This isn't anything that we can not do. So important. The 2 compelling reasons to consider funding a replacement now are, first, the crumbling infrastructure that we just talked about, and just as important as the increasing inmate population. There's a chart in your document there that shows the status of that detention center. This building was built in 1992. We talk about the original inmate population. Around 2008, it reached its peak at 366 inmates, 111 inmates over its maximum capacity. So the operational capacity of that facility is 204 inmates. Yesterday, the population was 201. Our maximum capacity is at 255. So you can see by that chart in the document that I gave you, since 2008, we did a lot of work with our local court system and tried to reduce the number of inmates that were going in there into the detention center with different programs. And you'll see that big number in 2008 and this steady reduction right around to 2021, which that impact, that dip there you see was COVID. There were a lot less arrests and incarcerations during that time period. But we worked hard during that time. The unintended consequence of reducing the number of nonviolent offenders in the detention center is that we used our nonviolent offenders to help maintain the facility. They cleaned and they painted and they took care of, right? So when we reduced that number of nonviolent offenders, we had that workforce was gone. It put all the burden of maintenance of the building on facilities itself. Now, these things that I'm showing you here aren't anything that inmates would take care of. This is obviously some technical work that's being done. But some of those things in the detention center and the degradation in there, you just can't keep up. The outside of the building is 33 years old. The inside of the building is 100 years old. And you see the effects of that. We talked about Our population right now, yeah, as of yesterday afternoon, was 2,001. Our operational capacity is 204. Our maximum capacity is 255 inmates, with 14 cells out of service, and they're constantly being repaired for whatever reason they are. That's 29 inmates, and that puts the number of beds that we have at 227. So we are right there. The current trend looks like we're going to increase the average daily population. That's the only way to really look at it, is look at the average daily population over a month of period and over years. It looks like we're going to be adding about 27 inmates every year for our average daily populations continuing to increase. So you see right at 2022, right at towards the end of COVID, that our number of inmates continued to increase.
Is that due to population increase in the county?
It could be due to population increase or increased law enforcement or increases in crime. You can go and look at all the statistics, crime rate versus population, and see that those things are happening. Another effect of that increase is it is still not an abundance of nonviolent inmates. These are still extremely or very violent inmates, many with mental health issues. The population is more violent and more dangerous than it ever was before, because the nonviolent offenders aren't there to lower that average of violence in the detention centers. So
Help me understand, do some of these violent offenders end up in a prison after they're adjudicated?
Yes.
So is our solicitor part of the
courts,
answer?
yes, ma'am. So the little number on the chart is the average length of stay. So it's a little harder to see, but that's really important and leads to your question. How long is a suspected criminal, so we're talking about pretrial inmates, how long are they in our detention center before they're remanded somewhere else?
Yep.
And that average right now, in 2023, it was like 11.75 days, and right now it's about 9 days. What's that?
That's not much. I was thinking more like a year.
Oh, no. Well, there are some inmates that have been there a couple years, 2 or 3 years even. There's some inmates with, honestly, many of the inmates that we have that have an extended length of stay have diminished mental capacity, and there is nowhere else for them to go. The moment they get out, they commit another crime, and they end up right back, and there's nowhere else to go.
Let's open
So-
up other questions. York,
Yes.
York, go ahead.
Just the degradation of the pipes, is it causing any environmental impact?
Not as far as we know.
Okay.
So where these plumbing pipes are, they're about 2 feet below the concrete surface. So that area that's being evacuated, likely that area is not
Being
great soil.
We don't see any sign of that, and it's contained within the building.
Okay,
Yes.
Councilman Passman?
I do understand that the need to rehab that building or replace that building is something that is well documented.
Yes.
I also know that our surrounding counties are having the same kind of problem, and that there have been numerous meetings with the 4 counties of Colleton, Hampton, Jasper, and Beaufort about a centralized detention facility.
Yes, sir.
That would not only solve the problems now, but be able to handle the problems for the next umpteen years by building a building that, as we continue to grow in population, we could house those inmates
Yes, sir. So-
correctly. So that's something we should consider as we move forward. And this facility, which is the best one of all the surrounding counties, could be converted to a juvenile facility.
There-
Because right now, the only way we deal with juveniles, they have to go to Columbia, which is very costly to do.
Yes, sir. All of that potential is there. Well, what we're asking today is, we're asking to support a strategy to fund a replacement of that building in the
Yeah,
future.
and
the re-
development of a strategy.
Development strategy.
Because it will take time to, what the needs are, where it would go, et
Yes,
cetera.
ma'am. You're
Okay.
exactly right. And we do have several studies. We have a 2008 study and a 2017 study that was already conducted about this facility and the possibility of growth or expansion here. And it's very limited, and we would still be subject to the
If-
current conditions
To
of the
develop a
facility.
strategy, would you do that in-house and then contract for design of it?
Well, first, I think this is a workshop for us, for our committee to talk about funding strategies, what that looks like in the future. And then we can reach out to consultants
Okay.
to help us with what
Yes,
it
sir.
looks like.
And then I
where it
think
could
we
be.
need consensus on, is it a regional strategy, or is it something?
Or is it just be?
So I think we
Right.
need direction from council on
both those.
on those items, is
Right.
kind of where I'm at right now.
So let's, okay, any comments?
Well, if, I would like to know, and we talked to Mr. Moore about this, if you look at regionally, we understand we're carrying the bulk of the load. So the question to you all would be, is that beneficial to do regional, or is it more beneficial to stay in our own county?
Agreed, and I think we agree that we will come back and have a further
Some pros and
discussion.
cons
Pros
of
and
both.
But we just want to tee up this, and if you all agree, we will work to bring you all options on this.
That'd be great.
That's, we're asking for that follow-up detention center workshop to discuss those issues.
That sounds good.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, okay.
All right, to build back to these existing facilities, Parks and Rec and Capital, I'm just going to go through a couple more, just so you know what the expenses are that are out there, that we'll be bringing you back strategies of how to fund. These are existing plans on the top two that are there right now. Buckwalter is half of what that is, only half of that's built out today. We only have enough impact fees, which we're already spending to build the top two fields, and we're waiting and collecting to try to build the other two fields. The tennis center way to the left isn't even close to funded. That's why we're going to talk about how do we accomplish these plans. If we're talking about new parks and more capacity, we really need to build out some of these existing plans, just like at Burton Wells. Same thing, the left side is in place. Some of that middle bottom part is in place, but the top part is all for renovation. Those are things that we can do, but we also want to make sure that, as I back up, is I've heard you all discuss multiple times, new parks, centers for growth. How do we handle this new growth and capacity and have services around the county? And is there a desire long-term, not to answer today necessarily, but we need to have a follow-up of, do we want to have a big sports tourism type facility to draw this activity that generates other things? But these are big ticket numbers alone before we talk about anything new. And that's why we need to say in capital, this new thing of capital, which is new stuff, specifically Parks and Rec, that's what we'll talk about in a follow-up.
And just for everyone's awareness, impact fees will not cut it.
Cover it.
It will not cover it, is a better word.
Right.
Yeah, it will not cover it. We don't have enough impact fees to do what the master plans for those two
Right.
centers, what we'd like to do. Okay, open it up. Any questions? Yes,
I
sir.
do have a question. Is there a way that we could put, let's use a splash pad idea or water park idea, put something that can generate revenue to go back into funding the other improvements?
Well, I can
That's
tell you
easier.
that my friend in the city built a water park. And while it will generate revenue, it never will sniff profit.
I'm just using that as
Right,
an
like-
example. Is there something that we could?
But that's where the sports tourism facility, as
Right.
opposed to that's a high expense maintenance issue. There are options of how you share you build a big sports tourism facility. You can use it for your recreational activities, but then you can also host these tournaments that people, not necessarily that you run, because currently our model is we run them. There are other facilities, and I'm not saying what's right or wrong, but then they literally contract the facility for somebody to run it and they rent it. Or there's a hybrid where you host and run. But those are what the sports tourism facilities could be discussed in a follow-up.
And are we looking at any grants, federal grants or anything like that, state grants to help fund some of these things?
Always.
Okay.
Always.
I think there's an
Like that
example. I
answer.
think York County had a millage set aside
Yes.
for Parks.
They do,
and
in the unincorporated areas, there's a millage, Parks and Rec
Rec, for
millage.
Parks
And so that's something that we would say, if we come back, that would be one of the potential options of how would we, back to defining whether it's in existing facilities or capital non-parks, this money is raised for this, and then you know, the taxpayer knows what they're paying for, the staff knows what it's used for.
And I will just highlight one difference between this county and York County is the county, Beaufort County runs parks within the municipalities, which was not the case for the most part in York County.
Right, and we run all of them here. We took over them
Yeah.
several,
And I
many
have
years
a-
ago.
I'm sorry, I have a question, new park centers for growth. So south of the Broad, District 6, 7, 8, there is a need for recreational, I'm talking soccer fields, baseball fields, softball fields.
Absolutely.
Not passive parks, I'm talking about recreation facilities.
I understand the need, and I think our discussion is how do we fund that?
And so-
I think we agree it's a need.
Yep.
Council agrees it's a need. Then we need to figure out ways to.
And that's also
fund
part
it.
of the definition of land preservation versus Parks and Rec, because this funding would go to Parks and Rec.
Right.
Whereas a millage is dedicated, we can't count on sales tax for, I mean, some counties do use sales tax for Parks and Rec, but that might not be
And-
feasible for our county.
And we'll throw that out there as an option later for a follow-up. We don't need to answer today is long-term strategy. What do you guys want to do with sales tax? But we'll talk about that in just a little bit.
Okay, any
That was
last
good.
words
So-
on Parks and Rec? Oh, go ahead.
Okay, good. Anything else? Then non-Parks and Rec capital, these are the big ticket items, okay? If we ever want to build that law enforcement center in Okatee, we're talking a couple $100 million potentially. Airport expansion, it had phase 2, I think the number I heard last was about $70 million. And now, the Fusky Island Ferry, I don't know, one day we'll actually own property, and we can talk about that. Future service sites and growth. Point is, I'm just putting it out there that if you have a dedicated funding source that you can then accrue over time, because it's dedicated, or because it's coming on a regular basis, you accrue or bond against, that just becomes part of your planning process, just to throw it out there. Now it's time for Pinky.
Another fun.
Let me, before you go back
Yes,
to
sir.
the Hilton Head Airport.
Yes, sir.
Hilton Head and the Beaufort Executive Airport are enterprise funds.
Pinky's about to cover
That's
that.
gonna, we're gonna talk about that.
And that's partly why when we were talking about how to put this together, we knew that question's coming. That's why she's going to come and talk about those different things.
Just for the public and for everyone, the Law Enforcement Center, in our bond, we are working on
I'm glad, so I'm sorry to cut you, but yeah, 2 things on here have partial funding. The Law Enforcement Center master plan process is funded in this current bond that just was issued.
just a reminder.
Additionally, the last one down there is off the list of needing funding because that also funds the construction of the new Public Works headquarters on Shanklin.
Yep, okay.
And while that's funded, we still need to look at, and we will discuss the referendum and what we need to do there. So that's coming up.
Oh, sorry. All right, our internet outage yesterday is why my slides look a little bit different than the others. We had to finish up late last night when we got internet. So this is a quick overview of the things that we're going to cover under the finance purview for this. Proprietary funds, everyone wants to know the difference between enterprise funds, internal service funds. Proprietary funds are what an enterprise fund and an internal service fund both are. It's where governments record business type activities in these types of funds, so therefore they're generally budget neutral. So we have currently, right, in this current fiscal year, we have 4 different enterprise funds. Our internal service fund is not active for fiscal year '25, but there is a request to get it reactivated for fiscal year '26, so that will be something that we will request council to let us move it back from the general fund to the internal service fund. We have the solid waste recycling fund, stormwater utilities. We have a separate fund for their grants. Same with Ladies Island Airport operations and their grants, and Hilton Head with their passenger facility charges and their grants as well. So these are the entire, every enterprise fund we have on in our books right now. Any questions on those enterprise funds before we move on?
When was the solid waste established? What year? Do you remember?
I know it was I believe it was 2022. There was, and Jared can probably elaborate. 2020. No. The enterprise fund was established in 2022's budget, but,
Stormwater was first, though.
correct.
Okay.
It was a user fee at one point that was projected, and then it didn't fare well. So I believe the discussion was to take the amount of millage that was the total operations of solid waste and put it into an enterprise fund. But generally, as a part of this year's request, I will request that we put solid waste back into the general fund, because it is a general government service that we provide, and that's where those types of activities should be housed. And really, it is not best practice for us to be funding an enterprise fund with ad valorem taxes. So we will be requesting that that get moved back to the general fund.
I was under the impression when we did that, that solid waste was moving toward a,
That they would pay for everything.
yeah, it would be funded, it would be, funds would be
Right.
generated through tipping fees, et cetera, and that,
I'm going to let the subject matter expert talk about that a little bit, because I believe that.
Yeah, real quick on the dates. So it was the fall of 2020, spring and fall is when the discussion, which is fiscal year '21, and then the implementation was fiscal year '22 is when that took place. So the discussion started a little bit before I got here, but discussion was around a user fee, a user's rate, similar to what Stormwater has. They have a user fee or a rate for impervious area. And a pay-as-you-go, so this is your fee based off this house. During that discussion through council at the time, there was concern about how that is appropriated versus this individual, and so the discussion came back to a millage. So it did roll out as an enterprise fund, but instead of its user fee, the funding mechanism was millage that was assigned.
okay. I do know at one time there was a big push to have curbside for all residents, which I thought was kind of out there, but
Well, it's out there. It actually did happen before. So in the early or late 90s, there was a curbside countywide. For whatever reason, that was done away with. And again, I'm trying to go back in history, but I think at that time, we had dumpsters. We didn't have convenience centers. So then the evolution of convenience centers, which happened statewide, and how waste management plans were developed interstate, those became the trend instead of that curbside countywide. And then since then, that really hasn't come up. We see curbside currently in the municipalities, and we've thought about it, but we haven't evaluated the feasibility of that curbside county.
You probably remember it too, York, when they tried to implement the curbside, they wanted to do the recycle too at the same time, and it was just, it failed in so many ways, and I don't think it was any particular department's fault. It just was too much expense for
Yeah,
the
and
whole
if there's
county.
interest, we can look at it and bring something back and workshop it or whatever that needs to take
I
place.
think, going back and forth just doesn't seem like good, sound management
Well, so
practice.
on the back and forth, and Pinky can help me out on this. So the intent was to set up an enterprise fund so that it would be prioritized and pay for itself. The business-like entity was the user fee, and then the MRF-like activities to help produce some additional revenue. Those were the components that were going to make it successful. When it got rolled out, the user fee was not appealing and was not voted on by county council, and the funding mechanism became millage. And since then, we've continued down the road with the MRF activities, and I don't know if we'll talk about this, or anyhow, we're doing MRF-like activities with a contract versus building our own MRF. And that's where we are in our stage. We've done more research. Everywhere we went, it just wasn't feasible, and we probably don't produce enough waste to make it feasible at this time.
I think what you're saying is probably is all good. It's just that when you make a decision,
I agree,
Yeah.
and I think the one thing that, and Pinky's here, and I trust her as the duty expert, we have had a lot of turnover the last 4 years, and there's been a lot of experts. I hope that Pinky will be here for a long time to come, and Mr. Moore, and each of you on council. And with that, hopefully, back and forth, we can resign that position and have just a forward.
I think that's well said, thank you.
Yeah, and I agree, and some of the business, from what he was said, if I was to interpret from my decodering, was a lot of the business principles upon which a decision were made have changed.
So the original intent in fiscal year '22 was to, because the user fee did not pass like they had intended for it to pass, it was a temporary short-term solution by funding it with ad valorem taxes. Generally, that's not a good practice for an enterprise fund. That's not what those ad valorem should go towards. So, and I think it, like Jared said, there's been some turnover, so it's just kind of stayed that way for 3 years. So our goal is to kind of clean up the general ledger as it should be.
And I think we're saying we're kind of half in, half out at this point.
Right.
And I think we just would like to see a decision on where we're going. And I think our recommendation is without the user fees and the MRF revenues, it's best to put it back into the
Put
general
it back in
fund.
the general budget.
Yeah, based on GASB standards, I would rather have a general
That's right.
government service provided back in the general
And
fund.
your report card.
That's exactly
is
right.
the GASB standards,
Right.
and so we.
Yeah, ad valorem taxes should not be funding an enterprise fund.
Yeah. Okay, any other comments about that? Wanna go forward? Okay.
Thanks, Drew.
And last thing, just to highlight, we're not talking about changing service. We're just talking about how this is,
Just where it's housed.
Just where the money's.
just in terms of funding, so.
Thank you.
And this will kind of, a follow-up slide about millage will show up here shortly, but that will also be bringing the associated millage back to the general fund. So another topic of discussion was fund balance ordinances and how it relates to our current fund balance. These are the two ordinances that were passed, one in 2014 and one in 2018, that established our reserve for unassigned fund balance. So in 2014, the council established that we will keep a total of 30% of general fund expenditures from the previous fiscal year in the general fund. And then subsequently, we split that to have 17% dedicated towards emergencies, hurricanes, disasters, so forth. So this is a quick overview. The second ordinance was adopting a set of financial policies that included everything from operating budget to capital improvement budget, and added the fund reserves and the differentiation of the 17% and the 30%. So wanted to make sure this was back out there so that you guys could review where those numbers came from.
And Pinky, I might just add, not to interrupt, but we just got our rating from Moody's and S&P, and we were graded on how well we did on fund balance, and we got we AA rating. So
Double A?
yeah, so
AA1. Mhm.
so I'm tooting the horn a little bit for Pinky. So.
Yeah.
I don't know that I could accept all of that, but obviously, there's going to be a request because, as Moody's pointed out, we have a very healthy fund balance, probably a little too healthy. I was a little nervous that
I
we might
agree
not
with-
get our bond issuance.
I agree with
because-
that 100%.
Yeah.
Go-
But I have a plan for that, don't worry. But I think I told Mike after the call, I was a little nervous they weren't going to give us our bond issuance because we had too much fund balance, but we're going to work on addressing some of that in the upcoming year. There was also a request to review our current millage allocation. This is what was passed with the budget ordinance for fiscal year 2025. So you can see county operations is at 42.3, debt service is at 3.2, purchase of real property, they have a debt service, and that millage is 3.0. CIP fund is 3.2 also. Economic development got increased to 1.3 based on the loan, and sure Hank has already covered that on various occasions. Solid Waste has 3.2 funding it in the enterprise fund, which again, if council is okay with, we will bring back to the general fund, so it'll add to county operations at the top. Indigent care for Beaufort, Jasper, Hampton, I always get that one mixed up. Comprehensive Health Services, I got the rest of it, is 0.4. And BMH went up to 0.6 in '25 based on the part of that bond issuance that we're doing right now. Same with higher education, it was 2.2, but TCL will be getting an additional 0.1 mils to address their debt service in the 2025 bond issuance. So any questions on the current millage?
I have some questions.
Sure.
Economic development. You said it increased to 1.3, what was it before?
I think it was .3?
I believe it was .3.
Right.
.3, it went up a
I'll
whole
elaborate on
point?
that one.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that was something that came before council early last year as part of the budget process, as opposed, the idea was, and is that the corporation, we previously, if they wanted to buy property, we would buy the property out of general fund or other sources determined by you guys. The idea was to have a additional mill that went to them solely for purchase of property. It would be in their name, however, the protections to council are, number one, we fund it. Number two, if they were ever to default, we would have first right of refusal. And number three, if they were ever to dissolve for any reason, whether that is on their own or we were to stop funding them and they went away, property reverts back to us. It's just to allow that group to act more nimbly than sometimes takes longer for a county. That was the principle behind it. There was a resolution passed by council before the budget process, and then it was written into the budget.
Another question, you said loan? Did you say something about loan?
Yeah, at the previous meetings, I know you've been to them where they talk about the credit facility that they're trying to secure, which has not been finalized yet because we have to approve language, which we'll bring forward to council when that is finalized to protect the county. We're working with legal on that. That would set up the funding agreement with them, which, just so you know, also protects you because you can't plan more than 5 years out. And it always, in the agreement, would say, subject to non-appropriation of funds. So you're not binding over future councils. But that is something that council passed, I believe unanimously, but I don't have that. And it was to offer this mill so that they could buy property, but we have all the protections that if something would ever happen, we would get that property. And that would include, what they've talked about at meetings would be, for example, like the Chilton track or the Geismar building in Beaufort area or other properties that they discussed.
Okay. Any other questions?
Not a question. The millage that you see there, that translates into your own personal bill that you receive from the county. When you get that bill from the county, it doesn't show what's on there because the office that develops those has chosen not to do that. I think that we, as council, should be able to direct that in the age of transparency, that the individual taxpayer should know every single thing that's on there that's on their tax bill. And it is not right now.
Yes, sir.
That's an issue between the auditor and the treasurer, and the auditor has asked the county's assistance in trying to resolve that. The auditor is for itemizing the bill, and Belize statute requires that, and we're working through that issue right now.
Great.
Oh,
That's good news. Yeah. I'm glad you're
He
working.
was here, sitting here. but
He was here a little while ago. so. And other counties do it.
Yes,
Yeah.
Yes, they do.
Okay.
it's statutory.
Yeah.
And I would just say this is just for a unincorporated taxpayer,
Just the unincorporated.
not inside the
Right.
municipality.
Right, yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Well, this was kind of similar to what Hank had earlier for the finance action items. These are the things that we would like to, would like council to consider. I mentioned the fund balance option. Currently, in preparing the capital budget for fiscal year '26, we're requesting to utilize $15 million from fund balance to address ongoing capital needs improvements that were established during the CIP process. So that plus the millage for capital improvement, I think will get us to about a $26 million capital budget going into fiscal year '26.
Is that capital improvement you're referring to there, the new capital improvement words or the old words?
That is the old words, but in the bringing it forward, we can define it further for you with the new terminology.
I would appreciate that.
And that still gives us enough money if the hurricane and we.
We'll still be in excess of the 30%. So
Okay.
this
That's
is
our
not,
cushion
yeah,
for-
we'll still have plenty of fund balance reserve.
During Matthew, just to remind everybody, we had to pay up front for cleaning up everything from Matthew, even though we got reimbursed. It took a year or longer, and that 30% kept us solvent, so we could clean up after Matthew. Okay.
Gotcha.
I have
All
another
right.
question.
Yes, ma'am.
Oh,
I have
no,
another
no.
question, and that, back to the economic development. If it went from .3 to 1.3, approximately how much money is that? Because like on my tax bill,
Yeah, it's.
Just for example,
it's
my
a
tax
little-
bill is $42.50 for rural and critical land.
So in rounding numbers, the value of a mill last year was a little 2.7 million
2.7
So it's-
for 1 mil?
for 1 mill. So probably close to the 3 million. I don't have a calculator in front
That
of me.
was around 3.
But we will
I don't
make
need an
estimates
exact-
But we
on
can
that.
make sure that we
I don't
get
need
you
an
the
number,
exact,
just
okay.
around $3 million.
And I can break it
Yeah.
up for you. The .3 before was for operations of the group. It pays our dues to Southern Carolina Alliance. It pays for the operation. And this one, the extra one, is what goes towards property acquisition.
Solely property.
And it's
it's
important to
around 3
recall that it's
million.
for a period of 5 years, is what council passed it for.
Right.
Any other questions?
All right. So we'll bring those things back as
Pinky,
listed.
remind me, how much is in the fund balance? Wasn't it around 79?
We're about 84 roughly right now.
And how much is what we need?
We're supposed to maintain 30% of the previous fiscal year's expenditure, so I can get those exact numbers for you
Lot
if
of
you'd
money.
like.
It's a lot, we're a lot over. Yeah,
We're a lot over.
we're a lot over.
Well said, Mr. Glover. Well said.
So the next couple slides, we're not going to gloss over them, but we're talking about future things that we want to bring back to you. So we won't need to go too far down, but we think that they're important things that you'd want to see in the coming months and year. One of them,
Let me just, and
Yes,
at the
ma'am. So I'm
end,
sorry.
everybody gets a round robin.
yes, so that's why I'm going to try to keep us on time and get through these next two so that we can have time for everybody to go around the room, talk about some potential initiatives you'd like to see, but to seek council consensus on whether or not that comes back, right? Because we can't, it's tough to trace down 11 individual requests, but that would be for council discussion, but we would like for everybody to be able to have that time at the end. So, keywords, everybody likes, and I think that's a blanket statement. I think everybody likes transparency and everybody likes some oversight because we all want to be responsible and do a good job. Something that has been discussed and that would come back if you are for establishing something like this would be a citizen advisory group. And that would be for you guys to decide at a workshop, what is this group made up of? What would be the purpose of this group? But we see from staff side, the first thing that this can do, the first topic that we hear about all the time, especially when we had a failed referendum last year, is the 2018 referendum. We know that there are this many projects and there's this much money
That were on the 2018.
that are on the 2018 referendum. What we would like to do as staff is tie this bow up. And as opposed to having it be Jared's list or Mike's list or Alice's list, we would establish this group at your discretion so that this becomes a citizen advisory group that establishes these priorities. So it's from the citizens and not from us, because that creates an air of, wait a minute, why did this get funded? Why did this not get funded? It's a consensus of the group that then comes to you guys. Potentially, it also works on if you should ever want to do future referenda, because this group then has credibility, we've done things, we know what they're doing, and that's where we'll go next. But is this something that you would like us to bring back for the formation, or at least the discussion of this formation, so that we can?
And I think, yeah, the important project they would take is the 2018 referendum, and
That'd be their first
how do we get that over the finish line? And how are we going to make decisions on what project gets funded and what doesn't? Because that's really where we're at right now.
Yeah.
Right.
Perfect. Yeah.
And they would make that recommendation to council is how we would look at that.
Perfect.
Any objections to
No.
that?
I think that'd be great.
Emphasis on the word citizen.
Yeah,
Yes.
citizen.
Yes.
And we have the school district's example to look at, too. They did a great job with their referendum.
Right.
It's a little different.
And so if this group does a good job, and if you guys have confidence and the citizens have confidence in this group, it could roll into potential things that we could do in the future. We talked about all those big ticket capital, new terminology, new buildings, new needs, and all those things. Those are the kind of things that would come forth on a capital project sales tax. That's not to be decided today, but that's just things that this group can do. It's things that in the coming months, this council will need to consider, because there are statutory time limits that you have to follow on putting a referendum before the citizenry. But there are also best practices that could have longer timelines for a better chance of success, so that we do better in the future. but a lot of it has to do with proving ourselves in the.
If I could,
Yes.
yeah, I agree with the citizen. If I could,
Yes.
yeah, I agree with the Citizen Advisory Committee. That's a must. The more involvement you have with the citizens is great. And I'm assuming that when you talk about an advisory group, you're talking about a centralized for the whole entire county?
Yes, sir, and that's what we would talk about in this workshop in establishing the group, is you guys would decide how we form this group.
How much?
Who are the representatives, where they're from,
Yeah.
how many there are.
And the capital sales tax, there's a formula for that representation.
Right.
Yeah.
In terms of municipalities being represented and then the rest of the counties.
Yeah.
Because I've been in counties that have passed a couple capital project sales tax, and that buy-in from the municipalities
It's
is
so
vital.
important. Yeah.
How much work would be involved with sort of decentralizing that advisory group as well? Because we got various communities. My community is totally different than Tom's community, and they got needs. And so if you got more people involved in that whole entire process versus that elite group,
Right.
I think we can get more buy-in to this whole
And that would be part of
process.
that discussion
Okay.
with the council.
Right. I'm going to say, the Citizens Advisory Group is essential for the 2018 referendum projects. If you go to the slide about the Capitol, it is a specific group, which is separate and apart from this one. You need two groups starting right now. It is already 2025. 2026 is a year away.
Exactly. So this would be a workshop that would come back fairly quickly. This would be one of the top
And
priorities.
to your point, the Citizens Advisory Group for the Capitol takes input, and then the way we did it previously and where I was before is they presented their list of projects to the council, and the council voted on that list of projects. But the Citizens Advisory Group did a lot of that. They were obviously supported by staff in terms of what are the needs out there, but there was engagement
Yes.
throughout the
And
county.
it might be that some from the 2018 advisory group might migrate to this other one, or there might be a completely different group.
Right.
Yeah,
And
we
so,
just have to see.
and the way that works in the Capitol, not to get too deep down the rabbit hole, because we'll talk about it, but we need to give the municipalities and us time to fully flesh out projects that we would present to that group. Because what it turns into is that group, whether it's one or two groups, that's up to be determined, people need to bring the pictures and the plans, and they present to this group, not a concept in a thought bubble, but a plan that is actionable, that's real, that has pictures that we can sell, that people can see the benefit of.
Can be implemented.
Okay?
Yeah.
Next, county properties. So this was put on the list, and I thought, oh, that'll be easy, I'll just go get a list of them. There are a bunch of lists of them. Okay? Mike has a book that's like this big. There are spreadsheets upon spreadsheets. I would just want to propose that staff brings back to you guys a true vetted list of usable vacant land, potentially buildings, but I just don't see too many that are empty for reuse. But really that usable vacant land, because if you look on our property lists, there are, it's not a million, but it's a lot.
260.
There are hundreds, but a lot of those are little pieces of rights of way at an intersection. So we need to go through and take out, we need to bring back to you usable, and so reusable, and then excess to be disposed of for sale for reuse of funds. That's what I would propose bringing back to you guys, if you're okay with that.
And also, we've had, Habitat for Humanity approach us about, do you have any, because that's their biggest expense. is
I'm
land.
speaking with them tomorrow. We don't have that list, but it would be to start that process.
And even the city of Beaufort, I've been in conversation with them about homeless shelters and other facilities in the area that maybe we could do a land grant to them to help get things started.
Right. So we'll bring all those back, and then you can make those decisions. We can bring back recommendations, what can be used for what we think we can use, and then what we think other people could use or sell.
Good idea.
Okay?
Right.
And then, this is our summary of what we've talked about today. There's going to be some more. People have jotted down notes. For example, we talked about the COLA, we talked about a pay policy for a stepped hybrid, talked about the policy changes in the fourth shift, but we also talked about a further discussion of insurance benefits and how that would work, whether it's retirees or currents, but we'll bring that back. Facilities, we're going to bring back those funding plans with new terminology We might not have a dedicated millage at this point, but we need to look at historical numbers and what that existing facility specifically needs to be in the short term, long term. In the short term, so that we can build a long term with that study. Transportation really has everything to do with that citizen group, because that's what's going to handle the 2018, and we can talk about what that does in the future. And then the property list. There's some other things jotted down that what we'd like to do after this meeting is take this list of priorities that you're having us charged with bringing back to you, bring it forward in committee and council. I'm not sure if it needs to go to committee or just straight to council, but either way, we do it properly, so that you can have a resolution adopting this as what our tasks are going forward, so that we have measurable success points of what we're doing to make sure that what we're doing is what you want us to do going forward.
Okay, and now we're going to do a round robin?
Yes, so that's why I just talked about other, strike the word staff. But the reason I put that is priorities for us, but let's go around the room, and that's up to you, Madam Chairman, to say where we discuss that.
Yeah, good. I don't want to make anybody feel bad about this, but too bad if you do. We had a meeting last year in February where we listed a lot of things that we wanted to get some attention paid to, and I'd like to go over those. Retirement health benefits, of course, was right on the top list. We needed a user-friendly website. I don't know if we have that yet. We talked about problems with the customer service and main line not being answered, and the greeting that was met by people coming into the main lobby. We asked for a review of county-owned land in February of '24, and we still don't have it. We asked for a comprehensive review of all county ordinances. I don't know if we have that. We talked about affordable housing, and talked about trying to find out what federal funds could be used towards affordable housing. The perennial ask for a splash pad, I think that's kind of just gone away, but we did ask for a study on it. We wanted to find out if we could do something for seniors, because we felt that the Parks and Recreation people may not have been focused as entirely as we would like to see, and we were wondering if that could be broken out from under Parks and Rec. We wanted to talk about funding and potential partners for a homeless shelter. We talked about the broadcasting situation with audio issues during our meetings. We asked for the Defusky Ferry problem to be resolved. We asked for the St. Helena Rec facilities. We asked for the piers at Pinckney and Melrose to be repaired. We talked about the concept of a wildlife refuge center. And we also talked about changing the council and committee meetings to start at 6 o'clock. Well, bravo,
We did
Alice.
one.
We got that done. But all those other things we brought up, and now a year has gone by, and they weren't mentioned today for the most part, and they're still pending. So
Wow.
I just thought I'd bring them up again and see if we can get some action on those items.
Very good. All right, thank you.
I happen to echo a lot of what
Ditto,
you said.
huh?
Yeah, well, not just ditto, but I mean, going through my list here, one of the priorities for me is, especially after talking to a lot of staff, is that retirement benefits. I don't know what it looks like, but I feel like that has to be addressed. In particular for my district, I would like to see Pineview Passive Park get a status update, and hopefully, I think it's funded this year. I'd like to see if we can get it built this year and open. And obviously, boat ramps throughout the county, I think, are important for me. I think that's a priority. And then also community centers, especially for St. Helena, Ladies Island, and I know there's work being done in Gerald's district as well in those community centers. I think they need a lot of attention. So, I mean, those are kind of my priorities.
Okay, Ms. Tab?
So I like a lot of what we already said, but one of the things that we've talked about before and is now brought up at Soloco is consolidation of fire districts. That is an interest for Beaufort City, for Port Royal, for Hilton Head and Bluffton. So I'd like to throw that in there. And really just getting something on the Defusky Ferry, getting it taken care of. Otherwise, we have all of the things we've talked about, and Pinky, I'm sure, will come up with possible use of the fund balance with dedicated millage for different funds. That would be interesting to me.
Okay, Paula?
I'm just gonna piggyback after what Mr. McEllen said. What a great memory, huh?
He's got
Remember
it
all that
written
stuff?
down.
Amazing. Really? Because I certainly, the list of ordinance I would really like to have. And the list of the vacant lands, because we have a council member, Mr. Cunningham, who's not here today, but he likes some ballparks in his district. So, and the Defusky Island Ferry too, I think we need to get that fixed.
Let's go to Mark, because I don't want to forget
Oh, yeah,
him.
that's his district, I know.
Mark?
Mr. Lawson.
Yeah, let me jump off mute. And obviously in my district, it's a very diverse district, but the Fusky Island Ferry, the issues there are most important, at least to me right now, when it comes to both embarkments, the ferry itself. But, and Ms. Brown mentioned it, and it's something that Mr. Cunningham always mentions is ballparks and places for kids to go. Even though I hear all the time from people in other parts of the county that Bluffton gets everything, we need more because we don't have enough. And that is not only my district, but also includes, Paulo's and Logan's and Joe's and Tabs as well, because that's all part of Bluffton as well that we have there. But we have to remember that when we talk about these priorities, we touched on earlier, the capital improvements that needs to be done, especially coming up with all of our buildings, and most importantly is our transportation. Obviously we have kind of sidestepped that now, thinking and hoping that the transportation sales tax was going to pass. We've got a lot of infrastructure needs that are coming up here that are, I hate to say more important, but they are more important than some of these ideas that we're talking about. We've got a bridge to build. We've got 170 we need to worry about. You've got Ladies Island as well that needs funds. So again, transportation is still a huge thing for us, and because we did not pass that 1 cent transportation tax, that leaves a huge void for not only the bridges on the Hilton Head, which are hundreds of $millions of over budget, but other parts of the county as well.
Okay, all right, thank you. Joe?
I've been harping on this for a long time. We do have broadcasting problems. They are not unique to us. They're consistent. We have to solve those because in our idea of being as transparent with our taxpayers, if they cannot see us, if they cannot hear us, that becomes a real problem. Evidenced yesterday, through no fault of our own, the website went down. Okay, so people couldn't get to us. We have a bigger problem here. We're on voice over IP. Our phones went down as well. We need a system. If this building goes dark, we have to be able to communicate. So we may have to put in a landline. So that's one thing. On the detention center, I've been working on this for over a year. By going to a regional detention center, our state delegation has said this is a unique opportunity whereby we, the delegation, can get you money. That's it.
Okay. All right, York?
I don't want to be redundant,
No, that's
so I'm not
good.
going to repeat anything that has been said that I agree with, and I agree with a lot that,
right.
but I do have a district that I do represent, and that's on St. Helena, so I need to emphasize recreation there, et cetera, et cetera. There's no question about that. I had a young man with his family, and he wanted to play soccer and practice with his kids, and he said, there is no soccer field on St. Helena. I think we have come with an agreement with the school district to utilize some of their facilities. I'm hoping that it could be opened up to some of those open fields to the community so that they can have access to that. So, and so I'm not going to hop on recreation because that was one of the issues that I started talking about in day one, and that's 8 years ago, recreation on St. Helena. We've got the study done, and we just need to start looking at implementing that report. But I would, in housing, affordable housing, homeless, I'm not going to talk about that because I do support that. Evacuation and transparency is like Passman just talked about, you know, that's one of the reasons I've been emphasizing broadband in rural community, because we would never know what's happening here if we can't see it on the internet. We are moving in that direction. We're utilizing federal funds for that, but I also hope that this county would dedicate funds, if necessary, toward completing that effort. So I'll leave that right there. The infrastructure that did not pass is crucial, and there are only two ways out of Beaufort. I'm not talking about Hilton Head, I'm not talking about Sheldon, I'm talking about Beaufort. You're either gonna go south on 170, or you're gonna go north on Highway 21. We gotta keep that open. And one of the fear I have right now is that on Highway 170 south, with all of the development that's happening over there, more and more traffic light is going to be required. I don't know how we stop that. And when you put more traffic light in, it's going to slow down traffic. I think we need to really talk about Highway 170 as we move forward with development. And I'm not going to talk about moratorium now, but if that's necessary till we get together and decide how we handle Highway 170 for traffic, I think we got to talk about it. So I'm going to leave that right there.
Okay.
York, thank you.
Tom?
Thank you, Chairman. Mr. Moore and staff, thank you very much for a great few hours. Each year that we're here, second year, we learn more and more, and appreciate that. I support my colleagues right here and what they're talking about. I will say we made a great effort to stay close to our residents. I think that's one of the key things we're doing better. Is this chat with council to learn more what we can do is critical. You know, I think I had it right on my notes here, focus on 2018 deliverables. I think if we can check those boxes and come back with projects that are complete, that's more credibility. So again, very good. Some of the good things. With Mr. Moore's direction and our involvement, we made some great strides in Bay Pines on stormwater. For years, I've been visiting here since 1990, and all I heard was how critical it is to get stormwater and drainage taken care of. We now have a major focus on that. Thank you all for that. York brought it up. He talked about a moratorium. I think not only in Hilton Head, but all across this county, we have a lot of unused buildings. I think just commercially alone, we ought to consider carefully putting a moratorium on that commercial side of it and really focusing on maintaining what we love, protect and preserve the pristine property, and use the buildings that we have. The work that we've done on green space or protecting property, I look at the Mitchellville 26, I look at Shelter Cove, 71 Shelter Cove, and I look most recently at the Jonesville piece. This council and this staff is going to go down as one of the most protective of our properties, I think, ever over the next couple of years, what we can do. I think that's incredible. I think the cooperation that we have exhibited with the St. James and Mr. Ford and what we're doing on that, the St. James Baptist Church move, I think is just incredible. That's been in the hopper for how many years? And just to do a little bit more, I want to do a little bit more work on my board assignments with the airport and the Breeze. I think they have a lot. I mean, the Breeze itself, I think, can help us a lot with transportation. But again, I enjoyed this year. I look forward to the next. And in light of all the stuff we have accomplished, more than I thought we would.
All right,
And,
thank you.
Thank you.
I just have a few comments. I wanted, again, to thank everyone on staff. I look back at what we talked about in 2017. I was cleaning up some stuff, and a lot has been accomplished when you go all the way back to that long period of time. I appreciate what Larry, his list from February of 2024, although I do think we've made progress with the seniors when we took over the contract for Meals on Wheels. We're getting more and more seniors involved in our recreation program through that, but I agreed with his list. And one of my priorities is to get the Citizen Advisory Committee started and start working as soon as possible with our reverse calendar for the next referendum. We get through March, we get through the bridge decisions. April, I think we need to come up with our Citizens Committee and capital improvements and/or transportation, whatever we're gonna do. I would like to thank everyone for their time. I think council can adjourn to back where Sarah's office if you're interested.
Right here.
Oh, okay, it's in the ECR. There's refreshments and I think lunch. Yeah.
Lunch? Oh,
Uh-huh,
lunch. Oh,
yeah, and
okay.
so, thank you all very much again. Sorry, Mark, you couldn't be with us in person, but thanks for your comments. We are adjourned.